Oh, we're 10 seconds early, sorry. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the regular meeting of council. We've got feedback. There we go. This is going to be trippy. Tuesday, May 9th, 2023, council chambers. We would like to begin this meeting by acknowledging that we are gathered on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Inca, Katma, and the Silk people. Any public input? Thank you. Thank you. 4.1, regular council meeting minutes, April 11th, 2023. Recommendation that the minutes of the regular council meeting held on April 11th, 2023 be adopted. Councillor Odom, Councillor Etchart, any errors or omissions? Oh, they're catching us. No public hearing. 6.1, general matters, delegations and recognitions. Dr. Carol Fenton to present on subject of municipal bylaws related to the use of drugs in public parks during BC's trial period of decriminalization. Dr. Fenton and crew. And I will get you to push that little red button right in front of you there, or whatever color it is. It'll be red when you push it.
Hopefully on Teams, but not yet in the call.
Yeah. I'll just get you to push the button in front of you there. There we go.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. I'm Dr. Carol Fenton. I'm a medical health officer with Interior Health, specifically with the geography of the Thompson Caribou, and my portfolio is the toxic drug crisis. So I'm here with both hats on, and in person I have brought Mayan Peacock, harm reduction coordinator, and Nelson Gladders, who is one of our decriminalization leads. So we're on a bit of an educational tour, and we're here to present some information. Next slide, please. Okay, is that your slide or mine?
That's me.
Okay.
Okay. So I just wanted to start with just a little bit of a background as to why we're here. We're here because of the toxic drug crisis. So toxic drug poisonings have become the second leading cause of death in BC. So far, there's been in 2022, there was 2,272 deaths resultant from overdose. 11 deaths in the local health authority, so that's Merritt, in 2022, and then there was 14 deaths in 2021 and 2 in 2020. So already this year in BC, we've seen almost 600 overdose deaths in the province. So remains just a public health emergency. And so when we go into, sorry, Nelson is into this one.
Oh, next slide, please.
Oh, sorry.
You're not driving.
I'm not driving. I'm not in control here. So when we look at who is dying, what we see from the grim statistics is that 72% of the people were in the 30 to 59-year-old age bracket. So when we look at that, we know that First Nations people are disproportionately represented, and although First Nations people are 3.3% of the population in BC, they comprise of 14% of those dying, and are dying at 4.8 times the rate of other BC residents. So only 12% were homeless at the time of death. Sorry, I'll just scroll down here. So some of these statistics are usually sort of somewhat surprising to people for who they think is dying versus who in reality is dying from the statistics. So where they are dying, the location. So in 2022, 85% of the illicit drug deaths occurred inside, and of those, 55% were in a private residence and 30% were in an other residence. Other residences could include hotels, motels, rooming houses, shelters, supportive housing. 14% occurred outside, and that includes vehicles, streets, sidewalks, parking lots, public parks, wooded areas, campgrounds. And then what we see from the people who have died is that 35% of those that died were employed at the time, and of those, 50% were employed in the trades or transport fields. 44% of those who died had received social assistance in the month prior to death. Most common, the most common mode of consumption is smoking, and about equal numbers snorting and injecting. So just a reminder that these statistics don't support the idea of a typical drug user and doesn't support stereotypes of people dying on the street with needles. And I'll pass it back to Dr. Fenton.
Sorry, I'm chomping at the bit. So what's really important to think about here is the most average or the most common demographic we see are working age men who work in the trades, transport, and equipment industries. So when we're designing interventions for the toxic drug crisis to prevent deaths, and if we want to prevent as many deaths as we can, that is the demographic we have to keep in mind. Next slide, please.
So, given all of this, why decriminalization? So, the philosophy behind it stems from the fact that criminalization and stigma lead people to hide their substance use and to avoid seeking treatment and care, and increases the risk of harm and death due to the toxic drug crisis. What decriminalization does is it aims to shift the approach that we are taking from one of prohibition and criminalization to a healthcare approach, hopefully reducing stigma and making people feel more comfortable to reach out for help. At its core, decriminalization is not about encouraging or even formally condoning drug use. It is about saying that if you are at risk from toxic drugs, we care more about your life and your health than we care about punishing you. The details of the exemption: it's effective from January 31st of this year for a 3-year period ending January 31st of 2026. It applies to all adults within the province of British Columbia. What is expected to change, what has changed rather, drugs under 2.5 grams found on someone's possession for personal use will not be confiscated, no arrest will be made for possession, and no charges will be laid. The drugs covered by this exemption include opioids, methamphetamine, cocaine, and crack, as well as MDMA. Instead, law enforcement, when encountering folks with possessing these substances under the threshold, they'll be provided with resource cards tailored to each health authority that will direct them to services for treatment and drug checking and other supports. This is meant to be treated as a floor. Officers are empowered to use their discretion for quantities over 2.5 grams. If it still seems consistent with personal use and not trafficking, they are empowered to leave those in the possession of the person and refrain from seeking criminal penalties for them. Decriminalization, next slide, is not legalization. There's a fine distinction that Dr. Fenton will explore in a moment. Decriminalization does not apply to any schools or licensed childcare facilities. It also does not apply at airports or in any motor vehicles or watercraft operated by a minor or operated by anyone where the substance is found within reach of the driver. It does also not apply to members of the Canadian Armed Forces subject to their service code of discipline. Trafficking of these substances remains illegal, and production of these substances remains illegal. Decriminalization will not affect the toxicity of the drugs themselves. The drugs are toxic for other reasons that have more to do with the incentive of getting as much potency out of as small an amount of product as possible.
Which I will talk about next.
Which Dr. Fenton will talk about. What it is hopefully going to do is permit folks who are struggling or at risk for the toxic drug crisis to seek help without fear of being criminalized for that. And has our guest joined the call?
Unfortunately, I'm afraid not.
Okay.
They on to the next session.
Okay. So yeah, if you could advance the slide then.
So you just heard Nelson say that the purpose of decriminalization is to shift from a criminalization law enforcement approach to substance use safety to more of a public health and healthcare approach. And what does that mean? What does that look like? So I've provided you a graph, and it's called the paradox of prohibition. And so what we see here on the y-axis is the health and social problems. And then on the x-axis, on the far left side, we have prohibition. And then in the middle, we have public health regulation. And then on the far right side, we have legalization with little to no restriction. And what we see here is a U-shaped curve, where on the far left, under prohibition, we have high rates of health and social problems. And then on the far right side, so legalization with few regulations, again, a lot of health and social problems. And we've seen this before. We've seen it before under prohibition of alcohol. When alcohol was illegal, it was enforced, and that then forced and incentivized the producers who were producing in secret, because they had to, it was illegal, to produce more concentrated, smaller packages that were more bang for your buck. And then that's why instead of wine and beer, we were seeing moonshine that led to disability and death. And now alcohol, as you can see, has swung more on the other side, where the Canadian low-risk use guidelines that outlined the health risks of alcohol and what a safe and healthy approach looks like to using alcohol came as a shock to most people, which means, there's more education needed and perhaps more regulation around labeling and education. And so what we can see here in the middle at the lowest point is currently cannabis. So we had an opportunity in 2017 when the government was legalizing cannabis to consult extensively with public health, and we were able to roll it out with specific public health regulations. And these things are child safe packaging, plain packaging, ban on advertising, limits on outlet densities, and so on and so forth. And so these things are the kinds of things that allow for informed consent, allow for people to understand the benefits and the risks, and to not to be exposed to it all the time. And so that's what those different control measures can look like. So right now, the reason that, and it's funny because it says heroin, cocaine, and methamphetamine, but we don't even have heroin on the market anymore. It's fentanyl, because fentanyl is hundreds of times more concentrated than heroin, and that's why it's much easier for them to smuggle it in. They can send it in the mail, and it's much harder to enforce. And so the enforcement of prohibition is what drives the toxicity. And so ideally, we can get into a more public health approach for all of these things, bring them all down to the bottom of the U-shaped curve. But that's my public health perspective on how these things work. All right, next slide, please. So we've explained decriminalization. We've explained the rationale for it. What does it mean for you folks as local government, and what should you do about it? The really important thing for you to know is that decriminalization is not a newfangled thing to do. It's been rolled out in many countries across the globe. We have decades of evidence, and that evidence does not show an impact on public use of substances or substance use levels generally. What that means is there is some mixed evidence which shows no correlation one direction or the other. That should be reassuring in terms of the concerns we see. A lot of people are worried that there will be more use if there's less stigma. That's not been seen. And so I'm hoping that large body of evidence is reassuring. Saying that, the recommendation from the provincial government is to wait for 6 months to evaluate if there is an impact, because we recognize that Merritt is not Portugal, is not Australia, and so we recognize there could be an impact. So let's wait and see if there is before we do anything different. You will likely have heard that there are municipalities that are looking at passing bylaws, and there are 2 pieces of legislation that require consultation on bylaws that impact public health. Consultation with either myself or the Minister of Health. I do think I am more accessible than the Minister of Health. I am just an email away, so let me know if you want to have any conversations about this. But what I really recommend is that if you're having issues with substance use or other related issues in your community, that we really partner with physicians who are providing care, with community agencies that are supporting these populations, with Interior Health, and really partner together to dig down to what are the issues specifically in the community and how do we support people to be the healthiest and safest possible. Next slide, please.
I'll jump in. So I just wanted to quickly go over the harm reduction services that are currently here in Merritt. So we have a few health centers that are basically giving out harm reduction supplies, as well as pharmacies. There's Merritt Mental Health and Substance Use. And then we do, through Ask Wellness, have drug checking. So drug checking is available there on Thursdays once a week, where people can bring their substance in and have it checked to see what the substance is containing. So that's a service right now that's being offered only on Thursdays, although they can drop off their substances throughout the week when Ask Wellness is open, if they would like to have them sent out to be tested as well. So part of my role as a harm reduction coordinator is we help to get sites set up with harm reduction supplies. So supplies that could be to help people use drugs more safely, have safer sex, those sorts of things. So if a community reaches out to us, then we can kind of go through the process and get their site set up so that they can distribute those supplies to people that they're seeing that could benefit from receiving those. So that's a big part of my role, I would say, is just supporting to make sure those people have the education while they're giving out those supplies. And if you know of anyone, or there's any community organizations or people in your community that are seeing people and would benefit from having harm reduction supplies on site, please send them my way. Next slide, please. And so we were just going to kind of just talk about some opportunities for collaboration between the health authority and the community, and I'll just let Dr. Carol Fenton jump in, and then.
Yeah, so some of you will know that we've, over the past 3 years that I've been in this role, we've had some conversations around some of the challenges in Merritt, specifically around housing, the shelter here in Merritt, as well as overdose prevention. And you may know that the only overdose prevention site in Merritt is the one on site at the shelter and is only accessible to those who are staying in the shelter. So if we go back to the slide around who is dying from the toxic drug crisis, all of those folks who are in private residences and are not in the shelter do not have access to that service and have to find their own ways to basically not die of the supply. So looking at potentially opening a public overdose prevention site could be an opportunity here in Merritt. And then Mayan's going to talk about the community action team.
Yeah, so right now in Merritt, we do have a group of community members that come together regularly to connect and talk about what the community in Merritt can do to help prevent overdose. There was a funding that has come through, which is through the Community Action Committee, as well as what's called the OARC, so the Overdose Action Response Center, and there's $60,000 that they've allocated to Merritt for the as CAP funding. So it's basically funding that goes towards a group to try and identify issues within the community and ways that they can help to support whatever needs they're seeing in the community. So I know that it has come to the city to say, hey, would you guys be interested in taking some of this funding and maybe looking at like having a social development coordinator position? I think it would be really beneficial for the city of Merritt. It's not going to make a difference as far as the funding, because the funding has been approved, it's coming in, whether it goes through the city or not, we still have the funding, which is wonderful, but I think there's benefits for it going through the city because, one, the sustainability, so the sustainability of the funding because you guys have such good reporting systems in place. So it's easy to say like, this is what we've done and continue on years to come with the funding coming in. Another piece is just having greater involvement and control and the city participation. So I think I don't know if there's been a decision that's been made on that yet or not, but I'm hopeful, and I think it would be beneficial if it went through the city. If it doesn't, having you guys at the table at a CAT committee would be phenomenal as well. So either way, I think it's really exciting for the city of Merritt to be the recipient of that $60,000, and I'm hopeful that that's just going to continue.
Many opportunities.
Yes.
Okay. So that's all of our content. We have emails, which I'm sure you will be able to access later, and then that's it. So we will talk to you later.
Do you mind a couple questions coming your way?
I do not mind.
Okay, so I'm going to start off with, and I'm going to be asking some questions, and I'm not trying to be antagonistical, but I find some issues. It's no secret that I've had an issue with this whole thing right from the start.
Sure.
The one thing that I don't understand, I guess, is the fact that we decrim the 2.5, but there's no safe drug supply. So the drug dealers are still making profit and selling poison. I would support this a little bit better if we had the ability to have a safe drug supply. And I mean, in a perfect world, that's where we would be. The thing that also gets me on this is that we have January 31st where we started, and we have a 3-year program. Mm-hmm. But there's no reporting schedule in the middle. We don't know where we are, where the deaths are we making progress, are we not? Now, we talked about Portugal and Australia. They have a process. And again, I would be more than happy to support it if I actually saw a process. Now, maybe that's coming. I understand this is in its infancy, but I would get behind it if we had the ability to see what the numbers were. Because at this point right now, we're only 3 deaths less than we were at this time last year. Now, I talked to our staff sergeant today, and there's a concern that has arisen that I think you should know about. And this is from Acting Detachment Commander Sergeant Rhoda. And he says, mischief, loss, enjoyment to property complaints are mostly taken from local businesses and even the city of Merritt regarding squatters, drug users, etc. on private property. In 2022, from February 1st to May 1st, we took in 48 of these complaints. This year, in 2023, since decriminalization from February 1st to May 1st, we have taken in 99 of these complaints. This is over a 100% increase in these types of calls to police, and the increase is directly related to the vagrancy and calls about drug use in our downtown core. And here's where I also have an issue. We have found it challenging to determine what is in the local drug supply as decriminalization has posed issues with us being able to seize drugs and send them for testing. The drug testing results we have received come from either a large drug seizure in other jurisdictions or from the coroner when somebody has overdosed and died. So one of the things that I have brought up over the last 3 months is the drug xylazine. I've been following this xylazine since it started showing up in Philadelphia, where it went to California, Portland, Seattle, now coming over the border. For those who don't know, xylazine is a tranquilizer, most usually a horse tranquilizer, but it's not opioid. So any naloxone kit won't help anybody that has a mix of xylazine and fentanyl. This is a concern. We already know it's over the border. I'm wondering how that will be tracked, and if the RCMP cannot test the drugs, how do we warn people what's in the drug situation? And that's, again, I don't mean to be confrontational, but these are questions that I have. And again, I know it's in its infancy, and we will be looking to you and your team for answers on this. So that's all I have. So I don't expect you to answer right now, but I just wanted you to know what my concerns were.
Thank you. I did keep track of 3 questions.
I can repeat them if you wish.
I'll give it a go, and then you can let me know what
Sure.
I missed. So the first question was around tracking and milestones. The province is working on a dashboard. There is a comprehensive evaluation plan that is being further enhanced based on our feedback. It's being done through the BCCSU and the Ministry of Mental Health and Addictions. I did request specifically to enhance sampling from the interior and our smaller municipalities to make sure that we are represented, but that data should be publicly available. Did they say June?
Yes.
June is what they told us, so it's coming. So yes, it's in its infancy, and I also would have preferred if they had this live before go time, but
just something, if you could, if the minister and yourselves could just give out little updates, this is what's happening in 6 months, I'd be fine with that. But we haven't heard anything since January the 31st, which I think cuts your legs off as well, because I understand what you're presenting. But for us, it's like, well, we're not, I mean, this is not going to save anybody. And this is what the police hand out. This is not going to save anyone.
Exactly. We don't expect this to change the toxicity, and we don't expect this to change deaths from toxic drugs until we start to see the stigma change and people start accessing services more. That may change the impact of the toxic drug supply, but again, this is about starting to shift the approach. We do have groups in the province who have tried to get an exemption to allow for legal supply with Health Canada. That has not succeeded thus far. And so we're looking at this sort of incremental change. So I do agree with that. Okay, so we talked about the reporting. The second question was around RCMP calls related to public drug use, related to theft, related to trespassing, so on and so forth. There could be a number of things contributing to that. One of them is likely awareness. People are aware that decrim is happening. We're all talking about it. There's a heightened awareness. And we've even seen this within the health system, a really increased like a significant increase in reporting of substance use events in acute care. And we suspect this is from an increase in reporting. It could also be from the fact that province-wide we are having a housing crisis. So again, back to who is dying, only less than 14% of those dying are houseless, but they're overrepresented in terms of our imagination of who is using drugs because they are visible. And that group is growing because housing is less and less accessible. And so that's really a crisis that could be driving some of this. And things like theft and vandalism remain illegal. And so there shouldn't be a change there. And that should be enforced. Like that remains the same. Okay, the third question, you're going to have to remind me.
I think it was decriminalization, but not a non-safe drug supply. Oh, the xylazine situation.
The xylazine, yes.
Sorry.
The testing, the drug checking. So your comment from your RCMP colleague is that they don't know what's in the drug supply because they aren't doing the seizures and the testing that way. But we do, from a public health perspective, know what's in the drug supply. When people bring their drugs for testing, we have all of that information. And so if we want to enhance that surveillance to get a better idea of what's in the street, we can enhance and scale up the drug testing programs.
That's great, but who from Merritt has had their drugs tested?
So at Ask Wellness, you can go in on Thursdays.
Okay. See, this is things we do not know.
You can go in and you can have your drugs checked.
Okay, thank you.
That's an option, and I think you can also drop them off any day of the week that Ask is open and have them sent away. Mm-hmm. The issue, though, of course, is still that comes back to the stigma often. Yes. In a community that people may not feel comfortable going into whichever place to say that I have these substances. But it is available, and what we do in our role as far as the drug checking piece is so through BC CDC, they have basically a reporting system where people who use drugs can report back into the system to say, hey, I've had this, I've noticed this isn't good, and then have follow-up that way. So that's one kind of check in place where the people who are using substances can report back in. Mm-hmm. We also monitor the EHS calls that come in. Yep. So we look at those daily, and if we notice a spike, then we phone out to the communities and we say, hey, have you noticed anything going on? Mm-hmm. The shelters, other places where people may be coming into contact with people who are using substances, and try and find out what's going on the front lines. So we take that information back, and then we take the information from places that are checking the drugs as well. And then if there is something that we're noting in the supply, then we would be looking at putting out a drug alert.
So you may have seen we do put out those drug alerts. And then the last piece was around your comment that naloxone doesn't work. That's not entirely true. So naloxone works against opioids, which kill people by suppressing their drive to breathe. And so they stop breathing and they suffocate. Mm-hmm. And so if someone has a mix of opioids and a different sedative, like a benzodiazepine or like a xylazine, the naloxone will restore their breathing. It just won't make them awake. And so it does change the response, but it still saves their lives. And so it's a bit of a misconception, but the naloxone is still really, really important.
But also xylazine is necrotic. people are literally rotting from the inside out. They're
I'm not saying it's a good thing, and I want
it's a bulky-
regulated alternatives to the illicit market, so that this is not something that people have to deal with, but this is the way we are able to respond with the legal framework that we are under.
Do you have to have a vet license to buy this xylazine?
I don't know.
No. That's what should happen, is only people who have veterinary licenses should be able to buy xylazine, because it's for horses so they can be operated standing up. So I was wondering why we don't have that in place. Because if you go into the Walmart, right on the door it says, we're watching you with the stuff that we buy. So I'm just saying, maybe it should be a deal where only people with vet licenses should be able to buy xylazine. Just saying. No, I'm not trying to be confrontational. It's a serious thing. I lost a son-in-law a little over a year ago to fentanyl.
Yeah.
So I'm not trying to be a hawk here. I'm trying to be a realist. And whatever we can do to help, I don't think anybody wants to live this life.
Correct.
And whatever we're here to help. But we also have to realize we have a community that is expecting us to keep them as safe as well. So we have to walk a very fine line here.
I mean, everyone here wants the same thing. We want everyone to be healthy and safe, and we're just here to bring the public health lens, the public health approach, and the evidence that we have.
And so sorry, Mike, for your loss.
You know what?
Yeah.
I'm just letting you know we've been through it.
Sorry. We do have fentanyl test strips as well. So they're take-home fentanyl test strips. So basically people can walk into a public health unit or pharmacy or another place that distributes harm reduction supplies and have access to take-home fentanyl test strips where they can test their substances for fentanyl presence. They are looking, at certain pilot projects right now for the xylazine as well. So I think the hope is to get ahead of it before we see, a huge influx of it into the province, but yeah.
Councillor Egan.
Thank you. I just wanted to know if people were actually using the test centers on Thursdays.
So the comments are, I don't think it's really utilized as well as it could be. It is being utilized, but not as well as it could be. And I think a big part of that, as I said, is the stigma reduction piece.
And
right?
When you're talking about 33 to 35% being in, was it transportation and trades,
Yep.
Especially in a town the size of Merritt, even if you had a social development coordinator, I can't see those people walking in. It's too easily to be identified.
Exactly.
And there are certain toolkits out there that are aimed at harm reduction specifically for the trades. So kind of educational modules that focus on the managers, that they can kind of distribute that information down into the trades. So there's some projects like that are going on right now. And maybe the CAT could say, hey, we're noticing there's nothing like this going on in Merritt. Let's try and reach out and make a game plan to try and get this information out to the people that are running the trades, things like that, right?
But if you have ideas on how to make it less stigmatizing and more accessible, we're all ears, because we have the same challenge.
Thank you.
Councillor Richard.
Thanks for the information. It's really interesting to see where we're at with this in in the last couple of years. I think all of us are a little concerned, but at the same time, I would be little bit nervous to try using a naloxone kit on somebody, because 5 years ago I had somebody go absolutely nuts and had a bad encounter. And so, some people don't really want to approach somebody who's high as a kite because it can be unsafe. So it's a bit of a concern. Can anybody, right now, if the shelters can only help the people staying there, would there be anything where we could maybe have people could access the shelters to have their drugs tested or something, or be a little bit more anonymous? Because as Councillor Egan mentioned, I think people feel if they are using, they keep it very quiet.
Yep.
And being in that category, age myself, if I was a user, I don't think I would want anybody to know, and I would do it in secret as well. And and I can see how this would happen. I personally only take Tylenol twice a year, but so I know nothing of drugs, but except for caffeine. But but I've had a bad experience with people around drugs, and I think that for the average person, trying to help somebody who's high can be a concern, because if you've had a bad experience with it, you want to be a little bit careful, but you want to help. But where to go, where the shelter maybe.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a challenge, and your comment has sort of brought two thoughts to my mind, and one is this is why these conversations are really, really important, and we need to have more conversations between us and out in the community around what is naloxone, and how does it work, and when would I use it, and all of those things, because the only time that you use naloxone is if someone is at risk from stopping breathing from overdose of an opioid, and so that person is not going to be conscious. And so that's when you see someone who's lying on the ground and you kind of see if they're rousable. If they're rousable, no need for naloxone. They're breathing, they're okay. But if they're not rousable and they're not breathing, that's when you call EMS and you get your naloxone kit out. So we really need to make sure that people understand those different scenarios and what to do. Absolutely, we need to make sure that there's a place that people can go. I can't speak for the shelter and the shelter's capacity and what the options could be, and that's why these further conversations are really important.
Well, that's great. I know personally I have no idea how to use a naloxone kit, so. I may have one, but I still don't know how to use it.
Read the instructions.
Thanks.
Councilor Newman.
Just in regards to, we're bringing up so to confirm, Merritt is the recipient of $60,000 worth of funding, and that is an annual funding, or we have to apply?
It's like you apply for it, but if you're utilizing the funding and it's going to where it's meant to be going, which is to prevent drug poisoning, then they're not going to, in my mind, cut it off. Like there's many other communities that have been functioning for years with their CAT teams, and they continue onwards, right? So I think it's great that Merritt has that money coming in, and that this is the first year it's been approved. And there's already, the wonderful thing about Merritt is there's already a group of stakeholders that come to a table because they're all concerned. So you have that community base. It's just, I think what's needed is sort of some more action planning and direction, and that's what a social planner could do, right? So I think it's awesome, and however, whether it comes to the city or whether we have to find another agency to distribute those funds, you have it, right? I'm hoping for the city because I think it would be more beneficial for the city, but yeah.
So then further to that, with the $60,000, that's great. And then you mentioned wanting to have members of council sit at this table, but yet we've not actually been formally approached or know on meeting dates or things like that. So if you would, and I know any one of us at any given time would love to be a part of the discussions, but if we don't know when the meetings are, it's very hard to attend.
Yeah, and I would be happy to, if there's a contact person that you can give me, okay, perfect. I would be happy to connect you in with
anything you have, and same with yourself, Doctor, anything. Yeah. I will move to council in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
Anything.
Before we move to any more questions, our peer Stephanie has finally joined us by Zoom and is hoping for a minute or two to speak.
Please. Yep.
I'm not sure if you guys can see me. Is it just audio?
Just audio.
Okay. So my name is Stephanie Michelle. I am
at Canadian Friendship Society. I am also a peer advisor for Interior Health. I'm a mother, and I also have lived experience with substance use, years of lived experience. So I have experience of using in my hometown community of Merritt, also in the downtown east side in Vancouver. So this area of decriminalization is something that I feel that we need to really focus on for our community. As an Indigenous person, I feel that it's important, to decriminalize so that our loved ones and our community members who are Indigenous have more time to focus on, things like cultural activities, connecting to the land, honoring ourselves. We can also have, more time to focus on our lives, and if we want to be sober and live that life, then we can focus on that too. And I feel as someone who used to use that decriminalization is beneficial for our community, for our loved ones. We've lost way too many Indigenous people in our communities, and if there's any way that we can, reduce the harm, I'm all for it. Because it's not easy that to live our lives and to worry about our loved ones constantly. Constantly I'm worrying about my loved ones out there, and so if we can reduce the harm and create a safe environment for our, our community, safer injection sites, places to use safely, places to test our drugs, places where we can go and feel like we're part of the community. I know that at Canadian Friendship Society, we have a program there where we feed the community members. And it's really nice to see, mothers, fathers, grandpas, grandmas, people who live on the streets, people who, are managers in their business. We're all coming together, and we're all in the same place eating food, because the way I see it, food and eating together is part of harm reduction. It's a big way to bring community together. And so I just really felt that I needed to speak, on behalf of my peers, on behalf of the Indigenous community, on behalf of, anybody who has lost somebody. So I just really thank you for giving me this time to speak.
Much appreciate your input. Councillor Ogun.
So I am very concerned about this topic. I feel like this is one component to how to deal with this exemption. It was brought tonight, the results from Portugal, for example, right? So I know that they have a different system in place. So I can mention also the recent audit that the Oregon Health Authority did, and it was finally they accepted that the strategy didn't work, and it has increased the numbers. So let's be positive, and in the best case scenario that this is going to work. The main goal here is to encourage addicts to come out and seek help. That's the main goal. I feel like if that happens, I don't feel like we have, or the province has the resources to provide those services. As of January 31st, 2023, the wait time to get a medical detox bed in Victoria, for example, it was over 90 days. So even in the best case scenario that, okay, yeah, they need the help, they need to be detoxed, so the resources are not there yet. So it's one component, but it should be different pieces to be able to achieve the goal that you guys are looking for. But again, I hope this works. I have my doubts. Thank you.
I have something.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Sorry. You're correct. You both are. We have, in preparing for decriminalization, the province studied 30 different jurisdictions that had implemented some form of decriminalization, and the goal was to have learned from all of them and not repeat the mistakes we might have found. I am not deeply versed in all of that research, but your point is well taken and is being monitored by people far brighter than I. What we circle around when it comes to decriminalization is that you are correct. It must be one component of a much broader strategy, and I can't speak to the other components of that system, the readiness. I know that we are shoring them up. I know that the province is behind us on that. But what I can also say is that criminalization does not help any of those things. It does not reduce public substance use, does not reduce the social harms from the substances. If you are struggling from toxic drugs, if you are at risk from that, the additional risk of having to avoid people knowing about it because you might have to go to jail, because you might be arrested, all of those things, it does not help people come out. It does not help people seek help. If somebody is sick and someone has a substance use disorder and addiction, as you said, there's no punishment you can put in front of that person that is going to help them heal. And that's why, to your staff sergeant's comments, I'll be reaching out to him individually, but I know he's on my list. We are meeting once a month with all of the law enforcement heads or the invitations and extended with the health authority so that we can be attentive to these exact sorts of things. I think the province, it would be amazing if they wrote an exemption that nailed it in one shot, but it is why we must remain committed to robust monitoring and evaluation, and that includes the RCMP, because we have to hear what's happening out there. If the way that this is being implemented is interfering with their ability to pursue trafficking, that's something that we need to hear from them, and we are working with them on making sure that this isn't something that goes on. It's not going to be perfect today, and you should keep your doubts. They will make sure that you keep us honest as we proceed. But the goal with us and law enforcement is a world where anybody who is at the very bottom of this, someone who is sick and needs help, can stand up and say, I need it. They can get their drugs checked. They can talk to a doctor and not fear that they're going to lose their job, their kids, their freedom in exchange for that. And the people who make this crisis worse on purpose for money can still be pursued with every tool the police have to pursue them. And that's what we're all working on together, I hope. Sorry.
Thank you. Councilor Petrosi.
Dr. Fenton, you said 82% are male that overdose deaths, I think was one of the figures.
I think it was 72%.
72?
I believe. The one with the hat, yep. Oh, back. 72, so, yeah.
And then 80...
Oh, 82% male, yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Is there a way to try to, I don't know, break that down even further? Trying to target males? I don't know, it's just 82% is really high, and I just don't know why. So, to break it down, like, are they married, single, like, are they actually living at home? Are they away from home working?
Right, so the other statistics on the slide are the attempts to, what are the other sort of categories that stand out? If it's not on the slide, it's a mixed bag and there's nothing that stands out. Yeah, okay. And exactly as you said, it's a stark statistic that stands out, but what do we do about it, right? 82% of half the population is at risk, potentially. And so what can we do? If you have ideas on how to reach that population, again, working age males in the trades, transport, and equipment is our most common single demographic, and they're very challenging to reach. Exactly why, as Councillor Etchart said, like they need to protect their livelihoods, they need to protect their reputation, and they're acting rationally under the environment where we are. There is the Lifeguard app, so it's an app on your phone. If you're going to use alone, you can push a button and then use, and then if you don't respond in a certain length of time, it will call EMS. So that is one intervention that may serve that population, but obviously isn't serving them well enough.
Okay, thank you.
I would also just, very quickly, I would also add just a shout out to some colleagues in the field. Several different construction safety associations have worked together on the tailgate toolkit. We could include some links to it, and we could maybe forward that along so it can be distributed to whoever I would send that to. But I'm doing some really, really great work in trying to target specifically the trades and folks who are sort of caught up in that work hard, play hard. How do we manage that safely? How do we talk to each other? And how do we make it okay for somebody to say, hey, make it like going off sick instead of getting arrested, having that sort of a thing. And there's some really great work we'll connect you guys to.
Thank you. Councillor Charney.
In this letter sent to all municipalities in Interior Health, you say decriminalization is an evidence-based strategy to reduce the harms currently associated with using drug substances. So the goal is not to stop people from using drugs, it's to prevent stigma, etc. do you not think that the province could spend their money more wisely in getting facilities for people who have drugs, a substance abuse, to go into the facility that have wraparound services? They're there for an extended length of time with different supports, with education, etc., so that when they come out of that facility, they can go into the community with continued support, but they would be off drugs. To me, that is a much better scenario, is to get people off drugs and clean than making sure that the stigma of using a drug is not there. We're still saying, yeah, go ahead, use your drugs, but we're not going to make a comment when you walk into that facility and have your drugs tested, etc.
Okay, there's a number of concepts in there. I'm going to call you out on some stigmatizing language, calling someone clean or dirty. That is very stigmatizing, whether or not they use. We don't call anyone who goes and has a beer at the hockey game dirty because they had a beer. And so we need to be very cautious with our language. Beer is a psychoactive substance. It's just one that is legal instead of one that is illegal. So we need to take a step back and say, what is a psychoactive substance and why does it matter what molecule it is? And so what I want as a person who exists in community as well as a public health specialist is I want everyone to live their fullest and healthiest potential, and for communities to be able to support each other when we're struggling and have the resources to maximize that potential. And that does not necessarily require people to be abstinent, whether from caffeine is a psychoactive substance, tobacco is a psychoactive substance, alcohol is a psychoactive substance. They could be on a medication, they could be taking morphine when recovering from surgery, or they could be self-medicating with the street supply, or they could be on a longer acting opioid that we call opioid agonist therapies for people who are accessing treatment for a substance use disorder. To me, it doesn't matter if they're taking medication, if they are living their healthiest life, if they are working as they are wanting to, if they are able to exercise and feel good about themselves and maintain their relationships. The status of their medication intake and their psychoactive substance use is irrelevant as long as they are healthy, and that is what we're going for. So that's that first piece about stigma. That's really important. The other piece around the treatment system, the accessibility, the ability to be away from potentially a harmful environment and get stabilized, have those wraparound services, absolutely, that is 100% needed. And the need for that, so decriminalization costs nothing. Aside from the education campaign. In fact, the evidence shows that it is a large cost saving because we are no longer putting people in jail about substance use. We can redirect that money potentially to that treatments wraparound as exactly as you described. So these are all pieces that are needed.
Okay, thank you. Just the one analogy about the beer comes to mind. If I have heroin in a park, I'm okay, but if I have a beer, I'm arrested. So there's a little bit of a discord there.
Exactly.
So until that demographic changes, it's pretty hard to change people's minds on that kind of thing.
I agree.
I'm going to be honest with you, we've grown up in a point in time where at my age, I never expected that we'd be buying marijuana at a store or legalizing every drug in the world to walk around in your streets. So it's a little hard for us old folks to wrap our heads around this. But not one of us doesn't want these people to live a better life, because I could never imagine waking up every day to a life like that one. So any information that you have, any updates, the construction, see, I've heard more in 1 hour than I've heard in 5 months. And I would like to get that message out to people, because I'm constantly saying, what is wrong with this government? But if we're able to throw that message out and help the fight, you can count on us to do that, but we need the information. And the minister needs to know that she needs to do a little bit more legwork, because we're not hearing nothing except for tonight. So I do appreciate, thank you for taking our slings and arrows, and thank you for your professionalism. I appreciate it. And thank you very much. You're free to go. I'll get you to kill that. Oh, sorry, Councillor Egan.
Always getting slighted.
Can I add one more thing as well? Just for the drug alerts, if you text the word join, like JOIN, to 253-787, that will sign you up for a drug alert. So if there was a drug alert, it would come to your phone and they would say, drug alert, this, 253-787.
Yeah, join.
And text the word join.
What is it?
253-7877?
787.
787.
So that's, anyone can sign up for that. It will let you know if there's something coming into your community.
Thank you. Councilor Egan.
Okay, thank you. I find all your comments tonight have been very enlightening. However, I just wanted to back up a little bit about what Councillor Charney said. I don't think she's trying to stigmatize anybody. And I think in light of our healthcare shortages in employment, it makes more sense to spend our dollars centralized for people that would like to get off drugs, as opposed to becoming clean or dirty or wherever you want to paraphrase it. I just think that it would be far more economical for people to be able to go to a place where education, medical staff, social assistance staff were there to help them. I know everybody would like to be able to be treated at home and stay at home. And unfortunately, in our day and age, it's just not economically feasible, in my opinion. Thank you.
Anyone else? Nelson, I'll give you the letter from the staff sergeant, please. All his contact information is right there. Thank you. Again, thank you very much for your presentation, and thank you to, if she's still here on the line, I appreciate it. And I'll just get you to kill that little button right in front of you there. Thank you very much. Thank you. Bylaws. Financial Plan 2023-2027 and Tax Rate 2023 bylaws to be introduced by Ms. Thiessen. You are up. Yeah, here we go.
Here we go. Thank you, Your Honor and Council. It's been a long haul, and we're I would say we're reaching the end of it, but the budget is actually a living document, and I just want to reiterate that as we go through it, as we go through the year, there probably will be amendments as things change, and it is hoped that staff will stay on the budget role that they're on and continue working towards the 2024 budget, so you will have the information earlier next year for next year's budget. Before we start, Mr. Lois, I just have one question for you. On the tax rate bylaw, we have the incorrect time for when the office closes. Can we change that before it goes through the first 3 readings? Was just brought to my attention just before we came into the meeting, so. So just a quick highlight of the financial plan process. We've had several meetings with council and staff. We had a public open house that was fairly well attended. And the bylaws need to be adopted by May 15th, 2023. And the bylaw for the financial plan gives the organization, the city, the authorization to spend money and proceed with projects. So if it's not included in the plan, they really don't have the authorization to do it. And that's why I say at some point down the road, if new opportunities come up, then the plan should be amended to include those. And as I've said before, staff is going to continue working on the budget process leading into the 2024 financial plan for early approval by council. They're already involved in it, so I'm hoping to encourage them to keep going and it just become an ongoing process. Because if you put it away for a few months, it's really hard to get back into. So if it stays on. Several items, including grant confirmation and other items, are still outstanding. So we have some grants that we know we've received, but that's not public knowledge yet. So we can't really get into the details. And there's other things. So it's based on the current information, and it can and will be amended as the information comes in.
Thank you. Dr. Fenton, you and your crew can leave at any point in time. You don't have to stay and listen to this boring stuff if you're not interested.
Do you have the ability to call us back when you're ready?
Oh.
The closed session motion?
Pardon me?
There's a later session motion.
Oh, wait, sorry. My mistake. Stay where you are. My mistake.
If you want, we can call you back if you want to go. If you want to give us your number and head over to hang out and partake of less dangerous substances. A psychoactive substance location across the street.
Yeah, we could be a while.
So I just wanted to summarize some of the highlights in the financial plan bylaw. So the revenues, total revenues for 2024 are $40,443,109. Now that's this 2024, 2022, and 2025 and 2026 are a little bit skewed because we have recovery dollars in there. So it's in making everything look much bigger than it normally would be. For 2023, we have 1,200, and just in the capital, we have over $12,649,000 in capital in 2023. And just over $1 million in operating so close to $14,000 is related strictly to recovery. So the breakdown on the revenue is 25% of the revenue this year for 2023 is for taxation, 3% is for parcel tax, 54% of it is for grants. And again, a large part of those grants are related to the recovery from the flooding. Sale of service user fees is 13% and other revenues is 5%. Now these percentages, as I say again, because of the impact of recovery, they're not kind of the normal. The other thing that is a bit abnormal is we're just getting back into things post-COVID for things like sale of service, recreation facilities, things like that. Same with building permit fees and things. Everything has been shifted because of I can provide you guys with a copy of these if you want. So that's the revenues. And one of the largest, the one most interesting to everybody is the total tax rates, is the taxation revenues that we collect. And as we discussed, we aimed for about a 5% tax increase on the average house for the Merritt taxes. And the other tax rates have come in, hospital, school, BC assessment, MFA, and overall, the percentage change has gone down in all classes. But residential properties in Merritt, I think, averaged about a 14% increase, 13, 14. So you'll see that the rates went down, but the taxation collected it will be similar to what it was in past years across the board. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask. The tax impact on an average house in 2022, a house valued at $482,000 paid a total taxes to all the authorities, including our $360 of parcel tax, of $3,613. In 2023, with a 13.3% increase in assessed value, that same property will be paying $3,759, which is a 4.02% increase overall. And then just the other main revenues, the other big revenue is grant revenues. And I just wanted to clarify, some of the grants are normal, regular operating grants we get every year, the small community grant, the traffic fine sharing grant. We have conditional grants included in the grant revenue. We have the BC Growing Communities Fund, I believe that's the correct name for that one, of $2.891 million. We have other conditional grants of $3.2 million, which are related to projects along different projects in town that we have. Community Works, that part of those included in there would be some of the grants for work up at the airport. Community Works gas tax grants, that's an annual grant at $372,081. Economic Development and Development Services grant, we have a total of about $542,475, and a lot of those grants is as Ms. Williams can probably attest to, for economic development, or in relation to the flooding and some of the money we received to help with recovery from that. Training and other grants, these are just generally small operating grants, 138,182. The total recovery grants anticipated for 2024 that we'll be drawing on is 1.1 million for operating of the recovery center, and then 12.6 million of recovery grants for the other recovery operations that'll be going on at a more capital fund. Grant in lieu's are 143,000, and that's where we receive grants in lieu of property tax payments for properties that are owned by the federal government and other government agencies. And then the regional grants are the payments from the regional district for. So it's not exact, but it gives you a good idea of what makes up that grant figure. Any questions?
Oh, Councillor Richard.
When you're talking about the average home with the increase from the 3613 to the 3759, does that include the utility billing biannually as well, or was that just the tax?
Just what's on the tax notice.
Okay.
But the utility charges have not gone up for 2024.
And those are without the homeowner grants? Those are just the base?
The ones that show up on the tax notice, the homeowner grant can be applied to them.
But when you were saying the average of the 3759 for the $546,000 house typical home, that didn't include the 770 that would come off of the grant, did it?
No, that's before the grant.
Okay.
That's before the grant. So they would take the 770 or the 1045 off, depending on their age.
And then that, yeah. Okay. Well, that's what I thought. I just thought it would kind of clarify, because I thought, seems a little. Yeah. Thanks.
And there is, and I just want to reiterate, at any time that we have the homeowner grant, which I think it's probably time for them to increase it. It's been the same level for years and years. There is the property tax deferment plan for anybody that's over 55. They do have a smaller version that's available for families, working families with children, but the restrictions are a little bit tighter for that. But if you own more than 30% equity in your house, you can defer your property taxes. So if you know of a senior whose property has increased because of the location that they're in and their taxes are becoming unmanageable, that is their opportunity. They can defer it. And I think the rate is at 1.5% this year. It previously had been only 0.5%. But there is that the province will pay their taxes on their behalf, and then it will just.
Yeah, I just wondered where I know we got an increase in the fire protection. Where does that fall in? Is that in the regional district?
An increase in revenue?
Yes.
Yes, it's not in the regional district. It's in the sale of services, because it's not a regional grant as such. We're selling the services, and Trans Mountain is included in that. And when you look at Schedule A of the Bylaw 2359, you'll see the sale of services goes down a little bit over the next couple of years, because one of the big ones we'll lose is the Trans Mountain fire protection.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Councillor Newman. I know you want to push that button. Any other questions?
Okay. So increases in expenditures, we've talked about all of this during our meeting. I just thought I'd summarize it for anybody. Increases in RC&P costs, including the retro pay, which we were paying back over a period of 24 months. Contracted wage increases in conferences and training, and we've increased it for council and for staff, and partly because a lot of those accounts were reduced during COVID because people just were not going to conferences. We've got a co-op student in IT. We've approved a records coordinator, and some positions this year, communications, and there was another one, I just can't think of it right now, will be filled for a full year versus a partial year the year before. So it's caused. Property insurance has almost doubled since the flooding. Our property insurance has gone up, as anybody knows who's had any claims. It makes it more difficult. Fuel and oil increases, increased utility costs, increased chemical costs for water and sewer, and then, as we've discussed already, contracted services are more expensive. For example, line painting. Sorry, what was that? Talking about utility costs. Yeah, so just to highlight a few of the capital projects, because over the 5 years of the plan, there's over $40 million in capital projects. Of that, 23 million are related to recovery. But the ones that are included for 2023 are the Vote Street repairs to the hospital. And another big one that you see, which will skew both the borrowing figure and the capital projects, is the Exit 286 utility extension. And then going out from after 2023, 2024 and on, you'll see parcel taxes go up, because if that project proceeds, the city will be borrowing the money on behalf of those property owners, and the plan is for them to pay it back through parcel taxes over the next 20 years or whatever the final decision is for how long the debt is funded. There's several recreation facilities, maintenance and upgrades included, which we've discussed. Water and sewer models graded and upgraded SCADA systems, plus a new fire vehicle and radio replacements, plus we have the bigger fire truck going out. And I think that's everything. If anybody has any questions.
Any questions? Councillor Charney.
Okay, I just have a few little nitpicky, and they're just typing errors. I don't know if it's important to point them out.
Sure. Go ahead.
On the very first page, and whereas the 5-year financial plan must set out, he proposed.
Oh, set out the proposed.
Yes.
You know how many people we've had proof this? I guess we know who to send it to next time.
And then on page 20, the proportion of revenues to be raised from parcel taxes in 2022, I assume that's 2023?
Yes.
Gold star for you, Councillor Charney.
Yes. Sorry.
It's all right. Any other questions? Okay, we have some recommendations.
Yes, I recommend that these two bylaws be read for the first 3 times tonight. The financial plan bylaw has to be approved first, and then the tax rate bylaw.
Okay, so recommendation that the financial plan 2023-2027 bylaw number 2351-2023 be read a first time. Councillor Etchart, Councillor Egan, any questions? All those in favor? Oh, hold on.
Just one. I think that I would read it as amended, so that we can include those 2 as well as the one that Greg just changed to include the change in time to 5:45 p.m. from 5:30 p.m.
Okay, thank you.
If council is supportive of that, the same motion as amended.
Let me read that again. That financial plan 2023-2027 bylaw number 2351-2023 be read at first time as amended. Same people. All those in favor? Opposed? Okay. That financial plan 2023-2027 bylaw number 2351-2023 be read a second time as amended. Councillor Charney? Councillor Egan? All those in favor? Opposed? That the financial plan 2023-2027 bylaw number 2351-2023 be read a third time as amended. Councillor Etchart, Councillor Egan? Any questions? All those in favor? Opposed? Recommendation. Councillor, Mr. Lavis.
Thank you, Worship. Before you get on to bylaw 2352, I did just want to explain the revised version which has been circulated on your tables. So the only change in there Under section 237 of the Community Charter, we're required to include the date and time the taxes are due by, and if they're not submitted by that time, then when the penalty will be imposed. Historically, the office is closed at 4:30 p.m., and so that was the time which has always been in this bylaw. But as you're aware, we're currently doing the trial of a 4-day work week, which has meant that we're closing instead at 5:45 p.m. So that's the reason why the time was essentially wrong in this one, because it was just the same as it's been in all of our prior ones. So assuming that you would like people to be able to pay at any time that the office is currently open, we would then encourage you to read this bylaw 2352 again as amended, in the same way as 2351 was for the typos in that.
Thank you. Okay, so recommendation that 2023 tax rate bylaw number 2352-2023 be read a first time as amended. Councillor Petrosi, Councillor Charney, any questions? All those in favor? Opposed? That recommendation that 2023 tax rate bylaw number 2352-2023 be read a second time as amended. Councillor Etchart, Councillor Egan, and Councillor Newman. All those in favor? Opposed? None. And finally, that the 2023 tax rate bylaw number 2023 be read a third time as amended. Councillor Etchart, Councillor Newman, any questions? All those in favor? Opposed? None. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Thiessen. Appreciate it. Thank you for all your hard work. Norm, thank you for all your hard work. Appreciate it. Thank you. 8.2, Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw number 2353 and Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 2354, 1227 Midday Valley Road, to be introduced by Ms. McRae-Williams. Ms. McRae-Williams.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So I'm just going to read through the staff report that I put together here. It's not too long. And then we'll look at the attachments I have to understand the OCP and zoning map changes that are being brought forward. And then Mr. Laus will speak to the bylaw changes that will be brought forward. So in the executive summary, the intent of the proposed official community plan amendment and proposed zoning amendment bylaws is to reconfigure the already permitted uses of the land and to provide clarity and consistency between Appendix A and the OCP land use designation map and Schedule A, the official zoning map. Additionally, this realignment supports a more viable future subdivision and development proposal while providing park trail access from Midday Valley Road through to the existing parkland adjacent the subject property, as well as road and trail access along Hill Street to the existing parkland from Lindley Creek Road. Would it be helpful? Okay, do you have the map up? Thank you. So currently the subject property is split into two land use designations in the OCP, industrial and park, and the subject property is split into 3 zones in the zoning bylaw: light industrial, future development, and park and cemetery. So this realignment would increase the park area from 6.15 acres to 7.19 acres, an increase of just over 1 acre. So we aren't losing parkland dedication here. I want to make that clear. And overall, staff is supportive of this OCP amendment and rezoning application. So for some background, the proposed OCP amendment zoning bylaw amendment are not introducing new land use designations, nor are they removing OCP land use designations. They're also not introducing new zoning, new zones, or removing existing zones. This is specifically a reconfiguration of the existing zones to provide consistency not only between the OCP and the zoning bylaw, but also to create more viable subdividable lots on this parcel. I'll just quickly highlight what these zones mean. So light industrial zone is orientated towards a range of light and medium manufacturing, processing, and other industrial uses. Park and cemetery. The park and cemetery zone is intended to identify lands for active or organized activities in parks, playfields, or recreational facilities, cemeteries, and public use within the municipality. Future development. The intent of this zone is to identify lands for future development as designated in the OCP. It's expected new development in this zone will be aligned with the general vision of the corresponding OCP sector. So during planning staff review of the application, it was requested that the applicant provide a trail connection as parkland dedication along the north side of the Crown-owned future development parcel. So if we're looking at that subdivision sketch plan there, the parcel that is not highlighted in pink or in green, just to the bottom there, is actually Crown land, so it's not part of this existing parcel. There is a park dedication to the left side of that, and then there's the future park proposed there. We thought it would be great to have a parkland dedication in there, but upon further conversation with staff, there has been previous conversations with the Crown, and since it's existing bare land, it's not built on, there's a potential for the city to either put a Crown land application in to dedicate that as parkland, or the Crown has mentioned sort of that they would just keep it as parkland at this point. So I just wanted to highlight that was requested, but it exists as a trail connection today. So the options that we have here, so council, the first option is council could provide 2 readings to each of the bylaws and instruct staff to organize a public hearing. Second option is council could amend the bylaws, read them, and instruct staff to organize a public hearing. Or third, council could receive this report for information. I just want to highlight some of the risks, financial and risk implications here. So there is significant economic interest in these parcels of land if the rezoning and OCP amendment is approved by council. There is very limited light industrial land available within the city of Merritt, and to encourage economic development of this scale, this realignment supports highest and best use for the site. And like I said previously, although there have been discussions with the Crown regarding a park trail connection within the Crown-owned future development parcel, this is not guaranteed at this time. I've highlighted the sections of the strategic plans that support this. So in the official community plan, I've highlighted the regional context statement here. Would you like me to read through these or? No, okay. So, I don't know.
Councilor Richard?
My only question that I had here is I know that there was a previous rezoning application, I guess to the east of this project maybe, for the townhomes and the mobile homes, and or I guess now we should call them manufactured because they'd have to be the modular A277 construction types on foundations, but so they're not really mobiles, but is that going on in addition to this application, or we haven't had a development permit come to you yet, maybe?
We're at the subdivision stage, I believe, for that. So a rezoning did come forward for, I believe you're speaking to the residential zone. Is that either the east? I'm not sure, but on west. Yeah, west. Yeah, okay, west is here. West on. So we are working through the subdivision application currently. And then this, it is the same property owner. However, they're 2 separate applications. Okay. So this one is at the rezoning stage. That one has been rezoned and is at the subdivision stage.
Because this does seem more appropriate to have the industrial there because it's also where closer to the big high power lines.
Correct.
Going through that property. So that actually seems a lot more appropriate than
for sure
what previous council had been shown.
Yeah.
So that actually is nice to see. And for the trail access, they're thinking about having access from Midi Valley for park users to get to the Windy Canyon, I'm guessing, based on this drawing. Hopefully.
So, are you guys okay if I just speak to this? It's not going to be recorded very well online, but to give you a sense of what you're saying. So, in this area is where you were talking about the
housing,
the modular mobile home zone
and townhouses.
Hasn't been. The zoning is done, the subdivision is not done.
No.
So you wouldn't see it until the subdivision completes, but actually that's pretty close. And these are connected in part because there is an access road that will come up to this park on this side. And so that will be one entry to the park. The other entry to the park will be here. As you saw, changing the alignment. These are the 2 Crown parcels that Lacey was referring to, that hopefully once we've received these, we will officially be able to make an application to Crown to make that law as well.
Perfect. Excellent. Thank you for for all the nosy questions.
Yeah, and no, that's a great question too. For it is light industrial, so this will not be heavy industrial uses. We won't have any Schedule 2 uses on this site, things like that. This is for light industrial.
Councilor Newman?
Following up on Councillor Etchard's comments, but in regards to the future development portion of the map there, it really worries me that it could be turned down. We have that opportunity where the Crown can deny us that in the middle of when we know property is at a high, when light industrial use is definitely a concern in our community where we don't have enough of it. My worry is going ahead and saying that that's likely, we're going to put in an application, but what if it gets denied and then we have 2 standalone park projects and a light industrial in the middle? I'm not sure if it's not wiser to apply for that in the beginning. I'm looking for some insight on how that looks going forward.
CEO Smith?
Ken, are you okay if I take this one? So I'm only speaking to this because I was the one that previously had the conversation with Crown Lands. And so I've had Greg pull up the topographical contours for those parcels. And so what I really wanted to showcase for you is that nobody's building on those parcels. You see a lot of orange. Those are 1 meter lines between those. And if you zone in, really, there's huge steep slopes on this. And so what it comes down to is they're pretty clear in saying, this is not ever going to be anything other than what it is. Could we formally give it to you so it's part of a Windy Canyon Park network? It would make a lot of sense for that, for them. But even if it was not to ever get formally given to us, it's going to be exactly what it is today. And so what they had indicated is there is a process for it, so he couldn't say, yes, we will definitely give this to you. There's a process for that includes consultation and other things, and we would certainly go through that. But their take was, we want to see that you're actually going to make the other things park, and so both these subdivisions they wanted to see those go through to demonstrate that we're actually moving that direction before we go create some park in the middle of nowhere with no access to that. They didn't have a lot of desire to entertain an application like that at the time, which actually is kind of sensible from their point. So I think it's highly likely they asked us to do it after.
Just to follow up on that, I just wanted clarity on this map. Is the bottom, because I understand that is going to be amended to park, and I know the section but is that access go straight over to Midday Valley Road? So it will have park access. Correct.
There's road access from both.
The other side I could tell, but I just wasn't sure if that was
correct.
Yes, what I was seeing. Thank you. Yeah.
Councilor Richard.
I like this proposal because we need to develop for industrial lands if we want to see economic development, and having the industrial in that section near the power lines is a lot better than earlier conversations that have been told about having the residential a lot closer, and this is just better. Anybody who hasn't seen some of the comments that were discussed before, this is an improvement. So I'm happy to see this. So thanks for the information, because this is reasonably sized lots that I think at 3.78 acres would be a good space for anybody looking to have their business moved here, hopefully. Thank you.
Sarah Smith. Chris Smith, are you done?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions for Lacey? Okay, we have some recommendations. Sorry, Mr. Lawless, were you going to speak to something here?
Thank you, Worship. I think Ms. McCrae-Williams just wanted me to talk briefly to the structure of the bylaws, essentially to explain how it's going to work. So we, as you're aware, we have the official community plan and the zoning bylaw, and it's always one of those awkward things where we have bylaws that don't sound like they're obviously doing anything. So, for example, the OCP clause talks about amending the boundaries, and then the zoning one tells you that we're changing things from P1 and light industrial to P1 and light industrial. But as she mentioned, what we're doing is reconfiguring the uses within the parcels. So although the overall permitted uses are not changing, the bylaw essentially provides instructions on how to redraw the zoning map, which will then be the actual governing document that determines what can be done where on these properties. So if you had any questions about basically the mechanics of how the bylaws were working, I'm available to clear anything up.
Any questions on that? Thank you for that explanation. So we'll move on to the recommendations. Recommendation that Council give first reading to the official community plan amendment bylaw number 2353-2023. Councillor Newman, Councillor Etchart. Any questions? All those in favor? Opposed? None. That Council give second reading to official community plan amendment bylaw number 2353-2023. Councillor Petrozzi, Councillor Egan. Any questions? All those in favor? Opposed? Recommendation that Council give first reading to zoning amendment bylaw number 2354-2023. Councillor Newman, Councillor Etchart. Any questions? All those in favor? Opposed? None. Recommendation that Council give second reading to the zoning amendment bylaw number 2354-2023. Councillor Egan, Councillor Etchart, any questions? All those in favor? Opposed? None. Recommendation that Council direct staff to schedule a public hearing. Councillor Newman, Councillor Etchart. Any questions on that? All those in favor? Thank you everyone for your presentations, appreciate that. New business, we don't have any. Let's go on to 9.1. 2023 bylaw enforcement to be introduced by Ms. Brick. Ms. Brick, the floor is yours. I'll wait till you push your button. You got to push your button there, Ms. Brick. There we go.
Just waiting for the PowerPoint.
Yep, we're waiting for PowerPoint. There we go.
Good evening, Council, and thank you, Your Honour, for the opportunity to present a high-level overview of the bylaw enforcement matters for the City of Merritt and to provide Council with an understanding of the approach staff use to address various situations. To clarify, the bylaw enforcement actions I'm speaking about tonight don't include land within the flood inundation zone. Staff will be bringing forward a report seeking direction on enforcement in the flood inundation zone at the May 23rd Council meeting. Next slide, please. Council authority to regulate, prohibit, or impose requirements for the protection and enhancement of the community comes from Section 64 of the Community Charter. Council may regulate in regard to matters of nuisance, disturbance, or other objectionable situations. The City of Merritt has enacted bylaws which regulate in regard to these matters through the Good Neighbour Bylaw, the Traffic Bylaw, the Zoning Bylaw. This is just to name a few of them. Next slide, please. Under the Good Neighbour Bylaw, the city, the city regulates nuisances, disturbances, and other objectionable situations that disturb the quiet, rest, enjoyment, comfort, and convenience of individuals or the public. This includes construction noise, derelict vehicles, noxious weeds, rubbish, unsightly premises, and property maintenance. The majority of the time, bylaw enforcement action is taken on a registered complaint basis. There's a few, so this means that we don't actively go out and look for bylaw infractions. We're told about them. That's the philosophy that we've been using here in the city. There are a few instances where the city is proactive, and I'm going to get to those instances shortly. Next Next one, please. One of the instances where the city is proactive is in regards to fire hazards. So under the Good Neighbor bylaw, the definitions for both rubbish and unsightly includes reference to landscaping that is overgrown or dry. We are diligent in reducing fire risk when we can. Letters are sent annually to property owners where the land displays vegetation that poses a hazard to the community. Owners are then requested to bring the property into compliance with a specified time frame, or alternatively, what the city will do is engage crews to complete the required yard maintenance at the owner's expense. When it comes to unsightly premises, we usually divide the categories into 4 categories. We look at private land that's occupied by the owner or a tenant. There's crown land. There's unoccupied or undeveloped private land. And then there's city land. So those are the 4 categories that we use when we're addressing unsightly premises here in the city. And each situation is handled very differently. Perfect, thank you. Where unsightly premises, when a complaint is received in regards to unsightly premises and the owner occupies the property, or there's a tenant living on the property, bylaw enforcement, this is done on a complaint basis. Bylaw enforcement will first assess the situation. If it's deemed to be unsightly, works directly with the owner to seek compliance with the bylaws. In most of these circumstances, education will address the issue. If the owner is not responsive to education, enforcement can be increased to ticketing, compliance letters, and negotiated cleanup schedules. If the owner is unwilling or unable to clean up the property, the city is able to hire a contractor to perform the required duties, and the owner is required to pay for the service. Under Section 258 of the Community Charter, we have the ability to actually attach those costs to the property, and so we're able to recoup the cost that way. In extreme cases where a response to specific conditions, council may use a remedial action requirement to enforce compliance. This is often seen as a last resort when all other efforts have been exhausted. So the first example there was when we would not necessarily go out and search for infractions. And we would work directly with the owners. We also have 3, and it's most of the instances when it's caused on private land and the owner is occupied, it's caused by the person that's living on the property. In the next 3 examples that we're going to talk about, it's not generally the person that owns the property that's causing the issue. It is outside forces that are coming in and acting on the property, not necessarily with the owner's permission. So on crown lands, what we find happens mostly on crown lands is that, for example, within the city, we have crown land when it's in the middle of the river. So one of the locations that we've received complaints of people who have been camping or there is large amounts of debris is in the middle of the Coldwater River next to the elementary school, because they're not during freshet, not right now, but in the dry season there is typically an area of land in there. When we encounter this sort of a situation, what happens is it's not city land, it's not private land, it's crown land. So what we would do in that case is connect with the province and have them come and provide enforcement. So it's outside of the city jurisdiction there. So we need to work with the property owner in that sense.
Councilor Newman?
Just a question in regards to that. What does the province send in as far as reinforcement or enforcement in those cases?
That's a very good question. I am very new to dealing with bylaw enforcement, so this is my first summer working with it. Greg or Sean may be able to elaborate a little bit more on this one.
Yeah, the truth is they tend not to send resources. They tend to ask us to do it, and then they will often reimburse us for the cost of any cleanup that is required. So that hasn't always come super easy, but it's a bit of a process. So we'll say, hey, we don't have people that come in and, you know, move folks or clean up messes that have been left behind. Can you find somebody to do it? And then they'll give us a location to send an invoice.
So is that, pardon me, is that RCMP so it's just rubbish removal, so to speak?
Very often it's tents and other goods that are kind of left behind in dilapidated condition. There might be other goods there. And so usually we're calling in a contractor. There's a few that we've called in the past to assist with this. The one exception to that is where there are really high number of sharps or other other kind of drug paraphernalia that's in the area. Not everyone is super thrilled to go do that work. There's been times where it's been public works crews that we've charged back, but depending on the nature of what is there, it often changes who we end up calling. But Crown Land has been a challenge because it's not like there's funds that are open for this. It's always a bit of you have to get to the right people in order to get to the right answers on that particular point.
And I'm just curious then, going forward, obviously with this specific location in mind, is it something that we proactively clean prior to fresh it? Because like I look at it, I know obviously right now, as Ms. Brick said, it's inaccessible, you can't get to it, that's fine, water comes in, cleans up the area, sends all the drug paraphernalia down, but after springtime right now, there's already been people out there inhabiting it prior to the flood season. So I'm just wondering, and then obviously that drug paraphernalia goes downstream and ends up in different situations. So I'm just wondering, like, if it didn't happen this year, is there a way going forward in the future to make sure that we proactively get there prior to the flood season to clean up the area?
We do actually have a very diligent bylaw enforcement officer here at the city, and he is very proactive in this sort of thing. He took me on a tour before the flooding happened, and it did not look that bad at that time when we were there. That's not to say that it didn't change the following weekend. Everything changes.
But walking that area a lot, most of the issues happen in the woods away from the freshet. Mm-hmm. It's mostly in the woods, whether we're flooding or not. You can clearly see where they are. But the flood has changed the direction of the flow, but the one area that gets heavily used is not affected by freshet at all. Mm-hmm. So, but Councillor Newman does bring in some stuff that some of the people do end up down there, but 90% is up in that woods.
Mm-hmm. Your Worship, there's actually one other city department that I know also has an interest in this area as well, which I wanted to raise because you talked about the woods. When there is, for example, a fire ban or fire restrictions in Merritt, the fire department are always extremely interested, eager to learn about if people are living or staying or camping in that area. Then a 911 call, if there is a fire present, I've been advised by the fire chief explicitly, is always the appropriate response to that.
So that's on Crown land. Moving to private land. Now, private land, when the land is vacant or under construction or under demolition, these lots tend to attract people as a place to stay. We have two scenarios that we have encountered, and there's two different outcomes. Well, same outcome, but two different approaches that we use. One is when we've been advised that somebody has set up an encampment of some sort on private land, we would contact the owners. The owner, because it's private land, they would need to file a trespass complaint with the RCMP. Once that's done, then we're able to get the RCMP to come and ask the people who are encamping on that land to vacate the land and to move along. So then we're able to remove the trespassers from that property with the help of the owners. Once that's done, then it's up to the owner to hire a contractor to clean up the property, bring it back into compliance with the bylaws, and secure it so that it's nice, neat, and tidy. Scenario 2 is when the homeowner is either unreachable, out of town, not willing to cooperate. What we need to do at that point is we need to go after the owner to be able to clean up the property. Because if they're not willing to lodge a trespass complaint against the people that are on the property, then it's the owner's responsibility to keep it in compliance with the unsightly premises in our Good Neighbor bylaw. That takes a little bit longer because we need to get a compliance order. We need to set deadlines to allow them enough time to come and clean up the property and hire their own contractors. If they fail to meet those deadlines, then we're able to advise them that we will hire a contractor, and then we bring in a contractor to clean up the property. And again, because it's associated with land, we're able to bill it back to them, have the owner pay the bill. If they don't pay it, then we're able to attach it to their property taxes. And then within 3 years, if they haven't paid the property taxes, then we're able to recoup the costs. So that's how we address on private land with vacant properties. Any questions in regards to that? The next slide, please. On city land, this is one where we have a challenge for certain. Nicola Park is designated as our overnight sheltering for unhoused populations. We have to designate a location within the city where people who are unhoused, are able to shelter overnight. That means that at 8 o'clock in the morning, their shelter needs to come down. If we don't have an area that's designated, then it's the entire city. So by designating a location within the city, then we're able to direct everybody to that one location. So that means that when people set up shelters in Spirit Square, we're able to ask them to remove those shelters because we can redirect them over to Nicola Park. So then we can remove them instantly. We don't have to wait for a timeline. When it's in Spirit Square, in Nicola Park, we do need to wait until 8 o'clock in the morning. That's when the shelters need to come down.
Just in regards to that, who states that we have to, is that, it's not the community charter, is it that states that we have to have a designated area?
Mr. Roberts. Thank you, Worship. Councillor Newman, there's no specific legislation that's been found in case law. So for about the last 15 years now, courts in British Columbia have been dealing with this issue. And the first really seminal case is called Adams, which was when the city of Victoria attempted to pass a bylaw and enforce a bylaw prohibiting any camping within the city. And they argued that the bylaw was appropriate as it affected all residents equally and said that nobody may camp in the city overnight. The Supreme Court of British Columbia determined that because there was no, I think at that point there were 1,200 unhoused people known in Victoria and only about 100 shelter spaces, and this was about 15 years ago now, that because it was physically impossible for everyone to get into a shelter space, that it was unlawful and a violation of their charter rights to prohibit the construction of any tents. Since then, the courts have refined the tests variously, particularly I think it's Abbotsford who have had were again one of the seminal cases that was about 10 years later. And they've basically they've laid out a series of considerations where essentially we've got to the point we are now where if we have a designated, we are allowed to have a designated location that we can move people onto and say that you are allowed to have tents here overnight between certain hours. But if we attempted to enforce what was the case in Merritt until about a year ago, where we had a blanket prohibition on any camping at all, that would have been overruled as an unjust infringement that was not enforceable, and therefore people would be allowed to camp anywhere in the city of Merritt.
And then just for my own clarity, obviously I was not here prior to last year. How did the city come across a park in the downtown core as their location of choice?
That's actually, I appreciate that it might look a little odd for people looking at it from the outside, but that was actually one of the reasons why it was picked, because so we consulted widely with particularly RCMP and also other organizations when making the designation. And the Nicola Park is pretty much immediately behind the homeless shelter as it currently is. So there were a number of people who were already congregating there. It was one of the natural locations for people to go to, in addition to Spirit Square, which we particularly particularly wanted people to not be camping in. Nicola Park has relatively good access for the social supports which are made available in Merritt, such as, say, the shelter for people who could access, say, services there on a day basis, but for whatever reason couldn't stay there, for walking distance to, say, Ask Wellness and other facilities. It was, relatively speaking, compared to some of our other parks, less visible and less accessible for, say, tourists passing through town. We very much felt as a city, I think, at the time that Nicola Park was not a good option, but that out of all the possibilities, it was the least bad option because it provided at least some access to the supports that homeless people needed.
And have we, since the time of naming Nicola Park as the designated location, reviewed it as far as additional lighting and safety measures being put in place for the rest of the public that might use that as a thoroughfare? I'm just curious.
There hasn't been any formal review which we've reported to council or anything, and obviously Public Works and bylaw enforcement have been monitoring the situation, and we do get regular complaints from public who are concerned about safety, who are concerned about the presence of homeless encampments. Since it is now a designated location, it essentially makes it more complicated for Nicola Park compared to other parks. For example, if there are complaints, it's very straightforward. They can now be moved on. But whereas before the bylaw change was made, they couldn't be because we had nowhere to send people. But now we know there are residents who live near Nicola Park who are extremely and understandably unhappy about it. And they have argued that they feel unsafe, they feel unhappy. Those have been taken on board on a staff level, but there hasn't been a formal, say, review of saying what might this look like compared to, say, moving things to Central Park, for example.
Thank you.
Kind of adding to some of those comments, it wasn't so much that any council decided that they really wanted to pick that park, it's so much that people picked that park. And rather than have them a little bit in the Centennial Park over by, no, was it Centennial? One by Collettville, beside Centennial, yeah, I think. Anyway, instead of having them in Vote Park and Centennial Park, and maybe behind Fur, where there's a lot of empty spaces and comfortable ditches that are easy to hide in at nighttime, people were kind of coming closer to town. And then by having those regulations, at least, then we could enforce a little bit. So, it was, you know, you had a choice of terrible choices to make, but at least by having that, it was something that we could kind of enforce because we had this out of control problem while trying to navigate the flood. So the decision last year wasn't a good one or an easy one, but just like right now, we have tough decisions to make to try and do something about the problem. We're forced to have to make some kind of tough decision. Not that we have any good options. They're all going to be difficult, and unfortunately, some people in town won't be happy, but we have to try doing something, and that was one of them, unfortunately.
I'm going to have to kill you for a minute. Councillor C.O. Smith.
Thank you. It's been touched on with the others, but I wanted to make a point because I think that highlighting it really is clear. There's ideal locations for the public, and then there's ideal locations for the community that uses it. And I think that the difficulty is that the ideal location for the public is somewhere 15 kilometers out of town, and that isn't the ideal area for the people who would actually use it. They'll never go there. You'll never be able to enforce it. And here's the bus that's going to take you back and forth every day, or whatever that looks like. And so the challenge is if realistically, once you get too far out of the downtown area where they do access services, you just have a really hard time getting them to go to that designated location, which ends up exactly where we were before with people everywhere. And so I will really echo this. Do not see a win until the overall problem gets addressed, and that's a much bigger challenge.
Councillor Charney.
You mentioned that you've had complaints. Is there a noise bylaw or anything in enforcement so that they're not at 3 a.m. making all this noise? Because I know the apartments are behind them, and then across the street there are residences. So I was just wondering about how the noise level is controlled.
Mr. Lewis?
Thank you, Worship. We do have noise provisions within the Good Neighbour bylaw, which is that no person shall make or cause, etc., any noise or sound which disturbs or tends to disturb the quiet, peace, rest, enjoyment, comfort, or convenience of the neighbourhood. So that is a fairly broad prohibition on basically disturbing noise within the city of Merritt. One of the major problems with noise regulations is that, say, at 3 a.m., when people are probably most sensitive to noise complaints because everybody wants to get a good night's sleep, we don't have bylaw officers working, which means that the only law enforcement agencies available to assist are the RCMP, and they typically have, relatively speaking, a view that they have more important matters or more pressing matters to be dealing with. They will respond to calls if they have manpower available, but it's often the case that it simply isn't possible for them to respond in time until, and then you get to say 8, 9 o'clock when we have bylaw enforcement who are present and able to help, but by that point the noise isn't being made anymore and people aren't really complaining anymore. So it is a hard one to enforce, but we are aware there are issues.
I have to be honest with you, every time someone shows up at that park, the very next day I get like phone calls from a lot of people. It's being watched very carefully. I've yet to have someone any complain about the noise. Matter of fact, it's the exact opposite. They want them out by 8 o'clock. So, and Wes has been, our bylaw officer has been very good about getting there. On the weekends it's a little different, but he's been very good about it. Councillor Newman?
So what would be the procedure then, or the proper process, just to review this in regards, like, I mean, obviously tonight's discussion is not necessarily to have a 3-hour discussion on what we think if this is the best park or if the lights need to be improved for the public safety as they're walking across one of our major fairs. It's also directly behind a tourist information booth. So, I mean, that's also when people pull in at 9 a.m. and there's still a bunch of tents still there. I know it has been brought to my attention that, you know, summer is coming and here we are. So I just like to see what the best way is to review this going forward and how we can get that done.
Cyril Smith?
I think our starting point to recommend would be to bring forward the original report, because a lot of it's going to hold true to just kind of wrap you around, hey, we considered this location, here's the pros, the cons, we considered this location, here's the pros and cons, to have this council review that as well. And if coming out of that you have an alternate way of wanting to, you either have more questions or there's a different spot that you wanted to locate, we can do that. So I think I would, maybe even a resolution if you think it's appropriate, or a notice of motion at a future one, in order to bring forward that report for review and discussion.
Okay. Well, Mr. Rose?
Thank you, Your Worship. And just to add to that, that if anybody did want to just read it independently, this was on the agenda for the May 10th, 2022 regular meeting of Council, the Amendments to Park Regulations Bylaw.
Amendment to Parks Bylaw?
Amendments to Park Regulations Bylaw, and this was on May 10th, 2022. And we can provide that link directly to Council as well.
And I think there may have been one additional meeting earlier as well where we discussed taking direction for what we would put in that bylaw. So we can bring that forward for you.
Oh, yeah, Councillor Egan?
I just wanted to ask where those two pictures on the right are in town.
Those pictures are in Hall Park at the very edge. There's actually a fence that runs along it. There's an opening in the fence and it's tucked right in behind it.
Near the back end?
It's near the back end, right against private property as well.
Oh, God. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
For those properties, what you're looking at there is 1 day. So the structure, where it's a structure there, that was day 1. The picture that you're seeing with the lineup of carts, etc., that was taken last summer, but that was after a week of not cleaning up. The picture with the tents, that's what it will look like after 2 weeks of not cleaning it. What we do is, so we ask that the shelters be removed daily at 8 a.m. Bylaw enforcement will go out and start encouraging people. We need our CMP backup whenever we're clearing an encampment. bylaw enforcement can't do that on their own. They need to have RCMP available and present. So while RCMP is there, then they can rouse people out of the tents, encourage them to start packing up. It will take several hours to get people packed up, moving, and out of the park. The RCMP are there during that time. If they get called out on a call, then we need to leave as well, because it's no longer safe for one person to be there alone. Once the encampment is completely vacant, then anything that's left behind, we can clean up. Anything that we find that has been left behind in encampments or in parks, we store for 30 days. So we will clean this up. Wesley does rounds daily to clean up. There's pictures later on that you'll see of what kind of materials that we get out of parks. So as I said, any of the salvageable materials are stored in our works yard for up to 30 days so that residents who have lost something that's important to them can come and ask for it back.
Councilwoman?
I think, and I appreciate all this information, but I think as far as, and hopefully there's support, but I would, not necessarily for the location, but if I could make a recommendation that staff provide us with that report that was discussed earlier, as well as possibly any safety concerns that might be out there for our staff as well as for the public to be included with that. I'm just going to put that out there as a form of a motion.
Seconder? Councilor Regan, any questions on the motion? You don't have any question on the motion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councilor Charney.
So I understand our bylaw office works Monday to Friday. So on Saturday, if the people decide not to leave, then they just stay there for the weekend?
Our bylaw enforcement officer is on a 4-day work week, so it is Tuesday to Friday.
4-day, okay, he's on
Tuesday
a 4-day.
to Friday. So over the weekends, so 3 days, there is no enforcement for bylaws over the weekends and on Mondays.
Okay, thanks. I mean, maybe we should look at more bylaws.
I do want to add that it's not the bylaw doing the enforcement. We have had some discussions with RCMP where, hey, if a whole crowd of people shows up, that might be different. But if it's kind of one person, there's an RCMP officer there, they have asked them to, hey, say 8 o'clock, we encourage you to move along. So a lot of this does have to kind of come in partnership with the RCMP, which, as you guys well know, you do pay for, at least a fairly good chunk of. And so we have had good support from the RCMP with this program. And so a lot of it comes from the fact that whether it's 4 days or 5 days, we need to have a bit of an all hands on deck approach. As well, part of this does come from the service organizations, outreach workers themselves, because they're also out at times on the weekends. And so encouraging compliance with the bylaw is one way that hopefully, if this is a service that's of value, then there's no benefit to anybody to have the community that's really upset about this or other things. And so we have had support from the outreach workers who have said, hey, you need to move along at times as well. So
the other thing I'd also like to add to that is that RCMP are empowered to enforce all of our bylaws 24/7, 365. Bylaw can't go up and do RCMP stuff, but RCMP can come down. Of course, we work closely. So, Your Worship, you have regular meetings with Josh. So we always hope that we can get compliance, not just, say, Tuesday to Friday, but it is, of course, complicated.
I do believe we've got our bylaw officer / vest and some personal protection.
Yes, Your Worship. There was an incident last year when an RCMP officer in the Lower Mainland was fatally stabbed while they were responding to an issue at a homeless encampment. And following that, we did a full review and significantly increased the safety equipment and provisions made available to our bylaw officer to ensure his safety.
Thank you.
Okay, so next slide, please. So I think we've already talked about We've already talked about most of this. I think this just shows what encampments look like, the scope of material that's removed from an encampment and a park. And then the storage bins, those are the storage bins down on the bottom left there that we use to store materials at our public works yard.
I have a question. Does anybody actually ever come back and ask for their stuff?
Very occasionally, Your Worship.
Oh, really? Okay, good. Oh, thank you.
Pretty rare.
Yeah. It is in a community interest. It is in the city's interest to store it. That way we are providing the opportunity for anyone who has lost something of value to get it back.
Okay, thank you.
This is kind of a fun story. The one time I recall where it did happen, it was a very small item that the person was looking for, and there was a lot of stuff there. So it was a full-blown needle in a haystack effort, and basically required everything coming out and everything going back in again afterwards. And so while we do it, I think we all secretly hope we won't need to do it, because it's actually a really big task depending on what is being requested.
Next slide, please. So something that can be done to support the problems in the community here with material traveling throughout the community is, can I pop to the next one here? Thanks. Okay. So since September of 2022, city staff have picked up over 100 shopping carts from locations throughout the city. These carts are stored in the public works yard, and businesses are requested to pick them up. Currently, there's more than 25 shopping carts in the public works yard that have not been retrieved. Often these shopping carts are found filled with material and have been abandoned in the city parks or on streets. When we encounter shopping carts that are left on their own, bylaw enforcement will pick them up, retrieve them, bring them back to the works yard, remove the materials from them, put them in the storage bins, and save the shopping carts for the stores to come and pick up. There's also 4 donation bins in the city, where 3 are in the downtown area and 1 is up by Walmart. It's been noted recently that the donation bins, they're often overflowing, as you can see in the picture here. Material is scattered on the neighboring properties, which causes concern for those who are responsible to clear it up. This one actually is next door to the Nicola Valley Food Bank is where this one is located, and material was spread out even as early as this morning, and there was a need to do some cleanup there. Some of these bins are overflowing, materials left next to them, or they have the ability for people to reach in and get material out of them. So those are ways that material is not going to the intended donators. So for people who are donating it, it's not reaching the people that they're intending it to go to. It's winding up on our city streets.
In regards to the donation bins, because in my time here at least, every time I look at those bins, they are overflowing. And I'm not saying that that's a daily thing, but like it's like when you go by them, you definitely see, in the grocery store parking lot is another one, that it's overflowing. So who's responsible for these bins, and how do we get them on because it's the Canadian Diabetes is advertised on the outside. They need to be here more than once a month. And my understanding is the once a month is the pickup schedule, and most people come springtime, we're out there cleaning I put stuff in these bins in the hopes that it gets to the right people. So how do we increase that?
That's certainly something that we can look into. We can go through a bylaw enforcement mechanism similar to shopping carts. There is no mechanisms in any of our bylaws right now to require stores to manage their shopping carts in a way that they can't leave their property.
So is it the store owner's responsibility?
The clothing bins are placed on private property. They're not on public property.
Right, so like the grocery store would be responsible then for it if that was where the parking lot is, that it is?
They should be, but we don't have any regulations of any sort that speak to this.
So we need a motion to...
We can bring back recommendations if you would like for changes to bylaws.
I'm going to make a motion that we get staff
Hold on a second.
Just before you go to motion, I think that there's conversations that could probably happen from the elected official level before we jump to bylaw action. I'd probably recommend that before, if you want to explore it, great, but I think that I know that, for example, Wes has had conversations with store owners, whether it's about shopping cart, could we please get locking mechanisms on this, which will make our life easier, right? And so I think that we could go to a bylaw mechanism, and that's not outside the range of possibility, but I think that perhaps having a council representative to have conversations to discuss, hey, is there anything that you can do? Is there anything that we can help you with? Is this about us making a call or you making a call more regularly to whether it's the Canadian Diabetes Association or wherever it needs to go? I think that I would always recommend a soft touch first, and then you go to a different approach if that is unsuccessful.
My motion was going to be that staff provide a report giving us recommendations on how to go forward with this.
But that's kind of the recommendation we're going to come up with, right? Yes. So, I mean,
I don't necessarily want to instill a bylaw yet, but we need to have something in place for us to get on that, right?
Let's let Ms. Brick finish, and then we can have our conversation on that, because I have some things like you I want to add.
So that's kind of where I left off with this slide, so we can move to the next slide if you would like. I got lots of topics. So if you would like to discuss that one, we certainly can, or I can move on to traffic bylaws as well. So that's my next topic.
Well, probably while the fire is hot, let's discuss what we just talked about. So, Councillor Newman, you're up.
Yeah, and much like I was just saying is I have a keen interest in getting this moving, especially with summer and tourist season being here. I think we definitely need to get on the cleanliness of our town quicker than not. And if this is one small fish to fry, that we can at least have a review from council, either be it committee of the whole and how it looks to get it moving, I think we do need to act on it. And I would like to hear at least other people's insight on it, or what else we could include on this and have it done at one shot.
And I have to agree with Councillor Newman. I like the idea of the $25 fee for the carts. Either $25, come pick up your cart, or we'll cut it in half and throw it in the garbage. One of the two. Because if you're going to leave your lambs out like that, we'll take care of them from now on. I mean, it's ridiculous. I don't know what those things cost, but it can't be cheap.
They're not.
And the other thing that I'm having an issue with is that we have a bylaw officer, not a garbage man. He's not hired to pick up garbage. I think what we need to do is ask wellness, endeavor to be better, and they need to have their groups go out and pick this stuff up. The 2 tents out there were out there for 3 days. The amount of garbage left behind there is unacceptable. So I think we need to approach both of these groups and say, look, your guests come to our town and they're in there. They pick up after themselves, or we'll get the whole freaking thing off, because it's getting ridiculous. People over there I understand we have a place for them, but they're welcome in our town like anybody else, but clean up after yourself before you leave. It is unacceptable to leave your garbage behind. The last time I walked through that park, and I took Councillor Charney through after, there was over 35 needles laying on the ground. That's unacceptable, especially at the place where we have people having something from A&W and the kids run across the bridge and they step on a needle. Now we're in a liability situation. So I think we need to enforce the fact that groups that are trying to help these people also need to educate them on how to work inside of a community. Leaving your junk here, and the thing that gets me is most of these people are not from here. They are here because there's things here for them until they get bored and they move on. So don't want to sound like an eagle or a hawk on this, but it becomes annoying after a while. And our bylaw officer has lots more on his plate than picking up garbage and carts every single day. So I would like to get something on the cart situation, and either pick them up or we'll cut them in half, and you won't get it back. Councillor Hogan. Oop, wait a minute. Councillor, that's right.
He was first.
Yeah, but your light went. It's the lottery.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, your light went.
Sorry, Manuel. Councillor Hogan, sorry. I think I got lost in thought listening to Mayor Getz, but
big.
Well, your words, not mine. I think this is quite the problem that we really have to think about, and we have to be very careful. And it's delicate because we have to be sensitive to these people that are in these homeless situations, but we also have to think about the residents, and it's tough. I lost my train of thought completely.
Well, you have a point, but the residents pay taxes, these people do not.
Oh, what I was going to say about the stores and what we were saying earlier was we have to be careful with Save One and No Frills with their carts and the other companies that have carts that are found in the public works, because they also are big donators to a lot of the volunteer events that we have, like for Remembrance Day and whatnot, and other activities. Like I know Save One and No Frills have often donated to different community groups, so I don't really want to just come down with the hammer and say we're finding you on everything, just too brash, because they're also very good supporters of events in the community.
But that's head office that does that, not the local ones.
Well, but at the same time, I don't want to bite the hand that feeds us, so I think that if we can have a nice conversation and work something out, that would be good.
They've had several conversations.
Well, yeah, but if you're going to implement a fine, I think that we have to give them some notice and be very sensitive with this, because they do a lot of good, and I understand it's a big problem, but, you know, we have to have a conversation, I think, before we make any kind of...
and that's what this is about.
Okay. That's all I'm saying.
This is what's coming back.
We do.
But the point of the matter is, I don't care what they fund. You come and get your cart. You've been asked to come and get it.
Well, that's fine, but I don't know that I'd want to just come down with a big fine for companies that also support lots of different groups that help a lot of kids and educational groups either as well. I'm, you know, just wanting to be respectful to business owners and have nice conversations.
But that's what this is about.
I'm not trying to be a jerk about it. So, anyway, thanks.
Holy smokes, we've got lights all over the place. Let's see who the next winner is. Councilor Hogan, it's you.
Okay, so I feel like there are so many sensitive topics here, so it's difficult to please both sides. So we have to be careful with what we are going to be doing here. I wouldn't like to go with a motion to put a bylaw to have a fee for these shopping carts myself. So I feel like based on the conversation that the CAO said, seems that the communication has been between bylaw officer and the stores. So I feel like it's time right now for a higher level to engage with the owners. And if that doesn't work, then we can talk about a bylaw. But at this point, it would be just to have other people engage.
Councilor Charney, wait a minute. Councilor Charney.
Just thinking about the carts that leave the premises. How expensive is it for businesses to put in that system that goes all the way around and the carts can't go past that? Is that a possibility, or are they going to lift them over that or go somewhere else? I don't know if that's a possibility. I mean, I look at Overweighty or Save On, if you had that system at all the exits, would they still go to that vacant lot and lift them over to the vacant lot? I don't know.
Most of their carts are outside, right? And then you put the quarter in and some, but that kind of went by the wayside.
Well, I know that was the system, but even still, when the quarter system, you saw those carts, even then, they put the quarter in. What's a quarter, right? In even $1. So I was just wondering, that system that stops the carts from leaving the premises, if we could approach the big stores and ask them if that's a possibility.
Councilor Newman?
Just in light of time of our lengthy agenda that we have here, not that I want to cut the conversation off, but if we make a motion to have both my previous topic, which has already left one side of my brain because now we're talking about shopping, the tents. The safety of the tent encampments and lighting and things like that, as well as the safety cards come back from staff. As just a simple report on how, we need to know the history as a whole before we can sit here and say, whether a fine is the right way or cutting the carts in half is the best way to do it after the third attempt to call them. Obviously, something needs to be done. So we as a group, I think, need to, be in, like Councillor O'Queen said, that we need to be in touch with the business owners, but we need a report. I believe it's the best way to do it is for staff to give us a report, to give us the guidance to go forward from this point. We can talk all night about options right now, but I think we really need to be informed on what has been done in the past, what's not successful, and what could be successful. And And I would put that in the form of a motion so that we can get somewhere on that.
So, do we want to wait for Ms. Brick to finish the whole thing and then ask for a report on the whole thing? Because that's what we're going to get, correct? Okay, let's go.
So somebody's keeping track of all the things we're requesting
Yep.
so far?
We are making notes and this is recorded.
Okay. When we get to the end of this conversation, there's going to be a lengthy one.
Next up is traffic bylaws. The top two parking enforcement issues are recreational vehicles and commercial parking regulations when we're talking about traffic bylaws. For recreational vehicles, residents may apply for a permit to park a recreational vehicle on the boulevard adjacent to their homes. City staff have received reports of residents that are living in recreational vehicles both in and outside of the flood inundation zone. Due to the housing crisis, staff do not actively investigate these reports. If RVs are parked on the boulevard and they're in the way of street construction or public works, we ask them to be removed so that we can address any issues that are ongoing on the street. And we don't allow RVs or mobile homes or anything like that to park in our parks overnight. In regards to commercial parking regulations, vehicles in excess of 16,000 kilogram gross vehicle weight are not permitted to park in residential zones unless a permit has been issued for the owner to park on their own property. Commercial vehicles of this size may only park in industrial or commercial zones which are accessed via the truck route. Conflict is caused when the industrial zone abuts a residential zone, as we see on Houston Street. So this is actually a picture of commercial vehicles that are parking on Houston Street. The ones parked on the right, so the two vehicles that are there, they're parked in what is considered a commercial zone or a heavy industrial zone. The one on the left, right across the street, he is parked in residential zoning. So when we're trying to enforce parking, it makes it very difficult because most people don't know what is industrial, what is not industrial. So that is definitely a challenge for parking enforcement. Another challenge that surrounds this is our, next slide please, is that our parking, the way that we hand out parking tickets, we currently are using the municipal information system, which means that we hand out tickets to an individual. We are not allowed to leave tickets on vehicles. So what we are proposing is that we move forward with a bylaw notice enforcement system through the Local Government Bylaw Notice Enforcement Act, which would allow bylaw enforcement to actually issue tickets to a vehicle. And we could mail tickets to an individual and to a residence. So this would be a big step forward for the city in being able to address situations where people are parked illegally. And it would assist staff greatly.
Thank you, Worship. I just wanted to add to that. The previous council in November of 2019 did pass a resolution instructing the city to enter into the system. It's a somewhat lengthy process, and unfortunately, it seems that the beginning of the pandemic, just a few weeks later, very much derailed everything. So there, as Ms. Brooks' report noted, there isn't an active instruction on the books, basically instructing us to do this, and I have recently attempted to contact the Ministry of the Attorney General to get information on essentially how fast we could go through the process now at this point. But I saw a lot of nodding heads when Ms. Brooke mentioned the possibility of making the step forward. I think we would, if you are similarly inclined, because it has now been 3.5 years, we would probably be very interested in getting a renewed resolution expressing this council's continued interest in bringing forward the membership of the BNE scheme if you were interested in that, in particular because you would need to pass a bylaw in order to join the scheme. That is part of the regulations required.
One question, does the bylaw officer have the ability to access ICBC to find out vehicles that are non-insured, or does he have that access?
At this point, no.
Not at this point. Historically, he has, and we're working on regaining that, which would be part of the BNE process.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Rogan?
So I'd like to know if we have, if this enforcement has been applied in a different community, and we know what's the rate, successful rate. Yeah.
This is applied in a great many municipalities throughout the province of BC. I've worked in several that have had this. Yeah.
Councillor. Mr. Lowes.
Sorry, I wish I shouldn't have turned the microphone off. Yes, to Councillor Algreen, so bylaw notice enforcement, off the top of my head, it's approximately 100 out of the 162 municipalities in British Columbia who have joined it. It's a slightly weird thing because the system is created by law, but whereas the scheme we are in, the information tickets, all we need to do is just pass our own bylaw, and then we can start issuing the tickets. Bylaw notice enforcement, we are required to both pass a local bylaw and then inform the Ministry of the Attorney General that we've done so, and then they do a very long process which culminates in issuing a regulation saying that we are authorized to participate in the scheme. As part of that, we also need to institute a position called a bylaw screening officer, which essentially acts as the first screening officer position. So a first screening of any complaints that come in under this scheme. So if people feel that tickets have been issued improperly. And so this is one of the reasons why because it is a much more responsive system and would allow us to issue tickets with much greater teeth, there is also it's much more involved to get into it. But approximately 1/2 to 2/3 of British Columbia municipalities are BNE communities.
Councillor Newman.
Just in regards to this process, my knowledge on this is that if we are then giving fines to people who have dollar figures attached to it, that this could also offset our bylaw enforcement costs. Am I correct in that?
What you would want, if we go with the BNE process, we would have a screening officer that would, like Mr. Lewis said, there would be a screening officer as the first process. So if someone was unhappy with the dispute or with the ticket that was issued, they can dispute it on certain grounds. The screening officer would review it. There should be a policy in place to identify what the grounds are for being able to excuse a ticket. Then there's an adjudication process. So if the ticket is upheld through the screening officer process, then the person who's issued the ticket, they can appeal to an adjudication process, which there would be a fee of, say, $25 that's associated with that for the cost of bringing in the adjudicator. You'd want to bring in an adjudicator when you have a significant number of tickets.
Do them all at once.
For them to do it. A lot of municipalities, what they will do is, if you can join up with another municipality, do the screening or do the adjudication process in tandem with another municipality. That's another way of cost saving.
I like it. I like it.
Councillor Egan.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to know if the staff could also bring us some information on what the costs are because you need a screening officer as well as a bylaw enforcement officer?
A bylaw enforcement officer is the person that actually issues the tickets. They should not be the same person that is screening and deciding whether or not the tickets.
We need the cost related to all of that as well.
Yeah.
But there should be something in place, right? If there's a process that all communities are following, then we should be able to get that relatively easily, should we not? Yes.
Yes, Councillor Egan, but I would like to note that a screening officer is, we would be very surprised if we were at a volume that was necessary to have a new body as a screening officer position. It would likely be added to an existing position, so it would not affect actual staff levels.
Okay, thank you.
Sounds like Mr. Lewis is volunteering.
No more likely me.
Recent staff reconfigurations, Your Worship.
Just checking. Thank you.
That is everything I have. So that is the end of my presentation.
So before I say Councillor Newman, go ahead, Councillor Newman.
I've got my notes here. Maybe I've missed one, but thank you, Ms. Burke. I think that was an excellent report, and as far as I'm concerned, a lot of information that I wasn't aware of prior to reading it. But, you know, again, I'm going to put it out there that we make a recommendation that I don't know how the best way to do this because there was many. The bylaw enforcement, there was signage for parking enforcement seems to be one. Trailers on the road seems to be one. Shopping carts needs to be one. Naquala Park. Pretty much everything that was in your report, I think, needs to come back to us in a cost-saving information report that is a little bit more concise, because I think from what I can tell, all of council is very interested in cleaning up all these aspects in our community. We all live here, our tax pays to enjoy our community, and I think it's time that we take responsibility for making Merritt a better and cleaner place to live. And that's in the form of a motion. You can read it back to me however you'd like and whenever you need to, but it's out there.
Okay, so we have Councillor Newman, Councillor Egan. That would be the recommendation, I'm assuming. And before we do that, I think Councillor Charney has something.
Yeah, I agree with what Councillor Newman has said, but I also think that we have to look at all of our bylaws. If we have a bylaw, we have to enforce these bylaws.
That's why
what is the point of a bylaw?
That's why we have the policy committee.
That's the next thing I was going. So it's not a bylaw committee. It's going to go through policy.
It's policy committee.
Okay, that's right. Because I think it's just ridiculous that, you know, if you have a rule, follow it. If you don't want to follow it, take the rule out.
That's what the policy.
That's my 2 cents worth.
Mr. Lawes, sorry.
Your worship, I think I just wanted to echo back the motion that I think we heard as staff, which was for council to report, for council to instruct staff to report back with more information on the items contained within this report, with proposals for bylaw alterations and cost-saving information.
For clarity, not necessarily cost savings, but costs incurred by doing any one of these things that might be, it might not be a savings, it might be an additional cost, but yes.
Absolutely. How much cheddar?
So yes, I think in my mind I had a slash between cost and savings rather than cost savings, but yeah.
So moved by Councillor Newman, seconded by Councillor Egan. Any other questions on the motion? All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Notices of motion? Nope. Reports from council. Who wants to go first? Councillor Charney. I know what this is about. It's about the big gift. Go ahead. The big prize.
So it's been a long time since we've had a regular council, so it goes back to April 13th.
Don't make me shut your mic off. I'm kidding.
Gee, you better not.
April 13th?
Yeah, April 13th. Councillor Etchart and I attended the ESS, and we had a scenario of a disaster. And that was really good. That was very informational. And I have to say, it's too bad our CAO is not here, but one of our councillors became addicted to the whiteboard also. Oh. So that was very concerning. April 14th at the Senior Center, our community policing officer, it was Marlene Jones that came to the seniors and presented a presentation on fraud. And that was very good. She had different frauds that are currently going on, past ones, etc. So that was good. April 19th, I went to the Nicola Valley Transportation Society. I had lunch with them, and we talked about expenses, etc. That was a good meeting. April 19th, open house for budget. That was very informative. I was hoping more of the public would come. April 24th, went to a 100th birthday party for Mrs. Perry, how do you say her name? Perry? Okay. And I want to look like that when I'm 100. April 25 to 28th was at Silga. That was very informative, and even though I did get a chintzy little gift basket, I've gotten over it since then. No, I've recovered.
You actually cheated for that one, by the way. You got exactly what you deserved.
You know what? That is karma, isn't it? That's right. Okay, let's carry on. April 29th, Eleanor Sturcrow, who was the MLA for Surrey South and the Shadow Minister for Mental Health and Addictions, plus our Jackie Taggart gave a presentation on decriminalization. That was very informative. I enjoyed that. Just more of the same questions. And on April 29th, went to the hospice. That was their opening of their new center, wasn't it? Yeah. And that was good. The presentation was good. I enjoyed that. This Saturday, there is a dinner and dance at the Elks Hall. They're raising money for the Elks Hall. And I invite all councilmen and staff to come to it. I have my tickets. And there's going to be a dance with rockers with walkers. Yes. Yep. So tickets are at Black's, or you can phone 378-4655 to get a ticket. $25, and I would like to see
Got mine
council
already.
there. You've got your tickets?
I do.
I got mine.
I was trying to copy the way.
Okay. And that's my report.
Thank you. Next in line, Councillor Newman.
I'm not going to make it a lengthy one. The only thing, only because Councillor Charney and I think all of us have been present for most of the events, is just in regards to SILGA, because I think I wanted to thank the mayor for pointing out recently that both of our resolutions that were sent to SILGA were passed and will be going on to UBCM in the fall. And I think I'm pretty proud of our council and our staff for getting them worded so well that I can speak at least on behalf of the healthcare one was unanimously stood behind. So, I mean, thank you, staff. Thank you, council. I think it was well done. And the rest of the reports I will leave to the other council members.
And Councillor Newman was so excited, she actually presented before the therefore came out.
All right, so now that you brought it up.
I love the passion.
It was the 31st resolution of the day and the last, and not a single person noticed that I did that, but I definitely got up and spoke. And you know what? I got it done. I'm still happy.
Too much caffeine. Councillor Chair, get your mic off. There we go. No, still on. There we go. Councillor Etchart.
Okay, number one, there was the mild giggling going around, but you were very focused on that. But it provided for an entertaining piece at SOGA. Reports, Councillor Charney covered most of it. There was a lot of interesting things. ESS was amazing. I may or may not have used the whiteboard, and these rumors of having loved it are untrue and unfounded. However, I see the convenience in there, but I will never admit to that fully. ESS is great. It's nice to see the emergency plan and as many people that are involved. I went to SILGA, loved it. I enjoyed the topics. I'm just sorry that I missed the bike tour because that would have been great, but that's okay. Mayor Getz and Councillor Charney enjoyed it on behalf, despite the flat tire that somebody got. The hospice opening and the other mental health piece that was put on later was very enjoyable, as well as all the other events going on in town in between. So there's a lot happening. We're all present, and it's nice to see that we all join a lot of the things. There was the dental clinic opening and getting to see the drummers there recently. That was also very interesting. And I don't think we can cover everything because we go to so many things that are really interesting, and it's good to see us all there, and it's nice to see the community welcome everybody to whatever's there, whether it's an opening or moving of the Kerry Ware's accounting office or the Stereoma Clinic enjoying their 10-year anniversary. There's just a lot happening everywhere all the time, and we have a great community, and it's nice to see how well involved we all are. Thanks.
Councillor Egan.
Okay.
No, you shut your mic off. Don't do that.
Thank you. I actually gave my report at the committee of the whole. So, but I'm not going to repeat the whole thing. The only thing I really want to repeat is the fact that I represented the mayor at the Legion Honor House, and it was very well done. And I think that everybody should know that anybody who dons a uniform for Canada or in aid, whether they're RCMP or firemen or other people that help the Canadian citizens out. Those services are there for you, so please make sure that if you need it, go and use the facilities because they're fabulous. And I think that's really all I don't have anything else to say except Silga was great. I did get a letter back from, not sure if you all saw that or not, from the Kalamalka Starfish Society that they did a 50-50 at the Silga, and then on behalf of the city of Merritt, I threw up a $50 bill and challenged all the other communities to raise money, and we raised another $3,000, so I got a letter of thanks from them.
Well done.
Well done, yes.
Dollars.
Yep.
Pardon?
You quadrupled the dollars.
Easily.
That's 3 years of food for those kids. Four.
Because we
Four.
700 originally.
Yeah,
Turned into
four.
$3,000.
Yeah, so they were pretty impressed.
Yeah.
Good job, Merritt.
Good job, Merritt. That's right.
We'll call her Jeannie.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, since I'll just start off with Silga, I have to be honest, it was one of the best Silgas I've been to in a long time. Really proud of this group. Handled yourself well. Councillor Newman got up there and did her thing. Councillor Egan, you did your thing. Everybody was networking, doing great stuff. So one of the best Silgas I've been to, and very proud to have attended it with you. I got a call from the Tourism Nicola Valley, and they have requested that Councillor Ogan be their liaison, and he has accepted. And so I will let them know that tomorrow. May the 3rd, I attended the Southeast Mayor and CEO workshop in Kelowna with CEO Smith, and it was very informative, and it was very interesting to hear how they talk about things, and there were some of the largest human beings I've ever seen in my life in there. I mean, no kidding. They were some gigantic people, but the way that, I think the most important or the most interesting one was the serious crime, gang, murder thing, and the way they approach things is just like, they make jokes about dragging bodies across the street when no one's looking. I mean, it was unreal, but it was really interesting. And we got some questions out there. One of the things that they're bringing forward is body cams. And my question is when does the body cam get turned on and turned off, and who controls that? And that's one thing they're working on, because the camera should never be able to be shut off until they get back to depot, as far as I'm concerned. But anyway, some really good stuff there. On May 4th, I presented to the Standing Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure. That was with the House of Commons in Ottawa. I did it on Zoom. I want to thank CEO Smith and Sean Strang for working with me to get the presentation. I made 5 recommendations that I'm hoping they will take into consideration to get our community back. Mayor Coyne from Princeton was on it with me as well. It was 2 hours of being very, it was quite intense, I have to be honest with you. I enjoyed it, but hopefully I don't have to do that again. And thanks to Dan Albus for arranging that for us. Dan is fighting very hard for funding for our dikes, and he's good for our community, and he's very concerned, so he's fighting very hard for us, just so we know. May 5th, we had the Mayor and Chair's meeting with EMBC on flood and fire update, but unfortunately their information is a little bit old. We already knew long before it was going on, but they are focusing on a very dry summer, so it's just something we should be aware of. And I asked for a little bit update on the fire break situation, where we are in fire breaks in our community, because I think we need to know that. I want to say thank you to Rick Green and his crew for getting on the riprap on the Trees Trailer Park when things started to fall apart. They got there very quickly and got that taken care of, and I know it eased a lot of minds. I was getting a lot of phone calls that morning, and our crew got on it really, really quickly, so I want to say thank you to them for that. Tomorrow is McHappy Day. If you're, I'll be singing burgers from 204, so bypass it all you can as possible. So if you have the moment and you've volunteered, tomorrow is the day. Now, what I used to do at one time in here, I used to do a thing called Gas Buddy, and I'm going to do it again today because I'm confused. Today, gas in Merritt was between 169.9 and 171.1. In Kelowna, it's between 159.9 and 168.1. In Prince George, it's 164.9 right across the board. In Vancouver, it's 179.1 to 181.1, and they are paying 15 cents extra for transit tax. And Victoria, it's $1.82.9 to 189.9. So by my calculations, we should be at $1.54.9 because we are actually almost paying the same price as Vancouver, and we don't have a transit tax. So I only do that to point out the fact that gas is a little high here. So anyone else have any? Oh, Councilor Newman goes again.
No, I just wanted to comment on that because I think that's something I know Merritt in the past, just from my being so close, is something that there was quite a bit of rallies that went on as well in regards to the gas prices here in the past. And maybe it's something that should be brought up to those that need to hear it, because I think we are paying extremely high gas prices in Merritt, and I understand the location, but it's never hurts to reach out to people and get something done about that, or at least brought up to the public, so that, it's raised again.
I'll do it every meeting. So, anyone else have any reports? We have some information items in the list here, and one is going to be addressed by Ms. Brick, or as Ms. Brick is available for questions. We have the Future Ready Action Plan, and there's Councilor Newman.
Are we going to go through each one of them, or would you?
I'm just going to say, if there's something that you are particular about, please shout it out.
Yep. Well, first I'm going to start with number 12.2, the Aspen BC Solar Project letter that I know I did make a email back and forth from council earlier when it's brought up that maybe we could get this group here as a delegation just to update this council on the project. I have heard of it in the past through my other council, but I would like to hear if they've gotten any further on this.
So, and I did send out something saying this is a group that's been here before. I was confused. It's not. This is a new group in a new situation. The one group we were talking about before was out near Douglas Lake. This is out the other way. So I was confused, and CAO Smith set me straight on that. So disregard my information on that.
Do we need that in a motion, or is that just a staff action?
CAO Smith?
I think that if you make a motion, I'm always okay with that. It makes it really clear. Wanted to make sure that council knows as well that this is a project that's kind of in between Princeton and Penticton, and so I don't know how much direct kind of benefit this is going to have, but if you wanted to have it, we can reach out. But I just wanted you guys to know the location in making that it's not like this is something that's in our back door. But.
I don't think it would hurt. I mean, if they're interested, that's fine. It's a little bit more clear. And I did see that it said 57 kilometers southwest of Merritt, or southeast, or whichever direction they put in their letter. So 57 kilometers really isn't that far. So I'm not sure that. Yeah, so I just, I would like to see that offer put out to them.
I'll second it.
Thank you.
Any other? All those in favor? Opposed? Anyone else want to pull anything out?
Yeah, I've got another one here still. 12.3, the Enbridge letter, because we did meet with them at SILGA, and we attended two separate, I think, information sessions in regards to that. So I think that's excellent, and I would just like to ask staff to reach out to Enbridge in regards to this to see if we can get some information for our public.
They actually they reached out to me this morning. They're going to be here on the 24th. Adam and I, unfortunately, will be winging our way to sunny Toronto. Yeah. But we still won't be here. 25th. We're not here. So they will be coming to. I let them know.
They mentioned that.
Yeah.
And I actually do have that on my calendar. But will they be doing advertising in regards to that?
I would imagine that would be their call.
Yeah. So as I understand, they've got two different things. So one, they're happy to possibly informally meet for coffee. And so I think that we could probably arrange that with members of council if you'd like. That would be a brief thing. But they have that evening, they'll be having an open house, which they will be advertising for.
Okay, that's all I needed, and I'm not interested in coffee at this point. Yeah.
I have one to pull out. I'd like to pull out 12.4, request for grave marker size change. I met with Rick Green on this today, and he talked with Stephanie. There's no issues with this. This is a family that has been established here a long time, and they have had kind of grandfathered in. I talked to Rick Green about it, and he said there's absolutely no issues, but he would prefer us to a motion to approve to move this forward. So I'm making the motion that we grandfather the size of the grave marker in for this request. Thank you. Any questions? All those in favor? Thank you very much. Councillor Newman.
Well, since Ms. Brick is here, I'm going to rally back to number 12.5 and for the food concession business bylaw review. At this point, we do have a committee set up for this, so I don't, just in light of the time tonight, as we do have an in-camera session, I would like to see this go to that committee if we could for further review. I don't think there's anything, sorry?
Sorry, just to clarify, so you'll be putting forward a resolution that this report be forwarded to the policy?
I'm making that right now. That we send this to the policy review committee for further review to come back to council just in light of time tonight.
Is that your motion?
Yes.
I'll second. Any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Anything else anybody want to talk to? Resolution that the meeting be closed to press and public under sections 92B and B, the consideration of information received and held in confidence relating to negotiations between the municipality and the provincial government of the or the federal government or both, or between the provincial government or the federal government or both and a third party. 91C, labor relations or other employee relations. 91E, the acquisition, disposition, and expropriation of land or improvements if council considers that disclosure could reasonably be expected to harm the interests of the municipality. 91G, litigation or potential litigation affecting the municipality of the community charter. Resolution to move to a closed session. Councillor Achart. Councillor Hogan. All those in favor? Opposed?